Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the September 2024 Methacton School Board, this regular board meeting. Please stand for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag, United States of America, to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The public is hereby advised of audio and video recording of this meeting for the purposes of rebroadcasting. By way of attendance, all board members are here except for Ms. Kanko, who is excused. Next is guest and scheduled speakers, Dr. Zerby.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. This evening, we have three presentations. The first, I'd like to introduce high school principal Dr. Deborah Euchre. She will present the M Awards. Dr. Euchre.
Good evening, Dr. Zerby. Do I just press it again? There we go. Good evening, Dr. Zerby and School Board of Directors. Thank you for having me today. Today, we are going to celebrate all the recipients of the M Award. The M Award is a distinguished award that is given to any student who received a 93 or above for their entire school year. Very prestigious. So currently there are 365 kids in our school who over the course of last year achieved this great milestone of 93 and above. We're going to start with our current sophomore class. I'm just going to list the names for you so you can peruse through the names. The current sophomore class has a total of 116 names on students who have received the M Award. We're going to move into our current junior class. In our junior class, we have a total of 121 students who achieved an M Award last year. And lastly, we have our seniors. Our seniors is the largest class of M Award recipients with a whopping 128 names on this list. Everyone in the entire Methacton High School community is extremely proud of these students. They'll be receiving their award, their certificate from the counseling department during school hours. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Euchre, and thank you to all of our student awardees. Next on the agenda, we have Board Honor Roll. It gives me great pleasure to do the following. For decades, PSBA has been recognizing the contributions of dedicated long-term local school directors. The Honor Roll is the association's way of thanking individuals who exemplify leadership by giving unselfishly of their time and talents for the betterment of public schools and students across the Commonwealth. This month, we want to recognize board member Samira Perdue, who is being recognized by the State Board Association for 5 years of giving her time and talent for the betterment of public schools and the importance of this volunteer role to shape the future of public education. Ms. Perdue? Congratulations.
Thank you.
Our new photographer is here.
Thank you.
Excellent. Congratulations, Ms. Perdue. And it's a testament to all of our school board directors for the time and talent that you give each and every day to this extraordinary school community. So thank you all. With that said, we do have our next presentation, which is the new high school financial strategy with PFM and Raymond James. But before we begin that presentation, I want to, on the new high school project, I want to bring the public up to date on a few items. Our next public meeting on the new high school is scheduled for October 2nd, 2024. That meeting will be relocated to the high school library. It was previously scheduled for the auditorium, but it will be moved to the high school library, and the presentation will include the educational impact information from last week's presentation, as well as any updates from the PFM's presentation this evening. The presentation will be live streamed. On October 9, 2024, we had advertised a scheduled special meeting of the Board of School Directors. This meeting will be an opportunity for the administration and the design team to summarize the process to date and for the board to hear public comment or feedback on the proposed new high school project. This October 9 meeting will not include a vote or actions by the board. It will serve as an opportunity for the public to provide feedback prior to a vote at the board's regular scheduled voting meeting on October 29, 2024. Again, on October 29, 2024, a vote to proceed forward with the next phase of the planning will be placed on the agenda. With that, I welcome our financial team to the podium, members of the school board. You have in front of you the presentation and paper copy for your review. We will be presenting this presentation up on the screen, and we then can take any questions that you might have of the presenters from members of the board at the conclusion of the presentation. Zach,
Okay,
it's all
great.
yours.
Yeah, thank you. So I will apologize to the public in advance that you have to listen to this boring finance presentation. We do have a lot to go through. So there's a handout in front of you. It's also on the board. I'm Zach Williard from PFM Financial Advisors. Okay. With me, your underwriter, Scott Kramer, and Allie Mackey from Raymond James. As we walk through this, we want to get through all the information, but we also want you to ask questions. Okay, so feel free to chime in, but kind of let us get through some of this might be answered as we go through the different pages. So yeah, we'll get started. Page number 1 is an interest rate chart. I'll turn this over to Scott here to quick talk about rates, but I think you all know the Fed met last week and they did lower the rate by 0.5%, the overnight rate, which does impact markets, but so far we haven't seen much happen. But Scott knows more about interest rates than I do, so I'll turn it over to him.
Well, it's set me up a little bit there. So yeah, I would agree that last week everyone was waiting with bated breath as to what the Federal Reserve was going to do. I think there was a little bit of surprise in that they lowered short-term interest rates by 50 basis points instead of 25 basis points. The market had largely anticipated that move. And so what we've seen since last week is actually short-term interest rates have moved up a little bit. And actually long-term interest rates in the 10 to 30-year spot of the curve have moved up slightly as well. I think that's a little bit of a short-term knee-jerk reaction. I think the trend over the next 12, 18, 24 months is for the Fed to continue lowering short-term interest rates. And I think that's going to be an opportunity for you all to take advantage of rates as we think about the high school project. The various interest rate charts you see on the page here, top of the page is showing you what has happened with, more importantly, short-term interest rates. Middle of the page, I think, is a good summary of where interest rates have been historically. We're still in a very good, relative to rates over the last 50 years, a good place to be thinking about projects and refinancings that we're going to touch on later in the presentation. So I think that's a fair start to, your timing is pretty good with respect to interest rates.
Yeah, and where school districts of, similar to Methacton are borrowing in the market right now is an all-in interest rate of somewhere between 3.5% and 4%. So if you were to go do a borrowing today for 25 years to start capital projects, you'd be somewhere in the 3.5% to 4% all-in. So, good interest rates, different than what you've been hearing about on the news. Page number 3, for those of you that you've been around for a while, this is, the same page we show you every time. This is what we call your debt summary. So this is the top half is all of the bond issues that you have, and then they add up to column 12, which is what's in your budget every year. You see a line item for debt service payment. Right now in the 25 budget year, you're about $9.4 million of existing debt. So this is kind of the page that says if you do nothing, this is what your debt payments look like. for the rest of their life. The bottom half is what we call the local effort. So that is net of the state reimbursement that you get on about 3 or 4 different bond issues that date back to the early 2000s. PlanCon does not exist anymore, at least in its old form. It's been in a moratorium for about 10 years. We don't expect any PlanCon for any future projects, so we don't assume any PlanCon for any future projects. But you still get PlanCon on your old bonds that had those, okay? The only other thing actually I want to hit on this page is in column 12, when you look down that column, you can see your debt service pays off fairly rapidly. It might not look rapidly, but it is. You know, you're at about $9 million, and in a few years it drops down to $4 million, and then out in 2035 it drops down to about $2 million a year. That's a very advantageous debt structure for large capital projects in the future because it allows you to wrap the new debt around the old debt, which minimizes the budget impact and the impact to the taxpayer. So you are positioned well to borrow some type of money for future projects to have, you know, what would be a lower impact than a lot of schools that have level debt service, you know, say at $9 million for the next 10 or 15 or 20 years. Then you're kind of stacking new debt on top of old debt. Here, we're going to stack new debt behind old debt, okay? And we'll show you what that really means in a moment. On page 4, we have a couple different bullets. The discussion tonight is similar to the discussion we had 2 weeks ago with the Finance Committee, which is, what does it look like if we borrow $200 million for the project? Okay, so that's the numbers that we're going to focus on this evening. Bullet number 2 there talks about, we do anticipate that this would happen over multiple years, all right, because you're not going to need all the money at once, and it takes a little bit to phase in new debt service of that size. And over that multi-year plan, we're also going to assume that you earn interest on the borrowed money, which can be used to downsize the overall cost of the project. You know, a lot of the different things that we talk about are all ways to minimize the budgetary impact, okay, because that's the goal, right, is to make this as cost effective as possible. So by utilizing the interest earnings to shrink how much you actually have to borrow is another way we're going to help minimize that. And you do have that in this scenario, which we did not have 2 weeks ago, okay, because we do have a draw schedule now. Under federal tax law, it's important, if you look at 3A, we always like to remind everyone, when you do borrow money, the expectation is you're going to spend that borrowed money, 85% of it within 3 years. So another reason that we would not run out and borrow $200 million today or $100 million or whatever it is, because you're probably not going to be able to spend it that quickly. So when we talk about phasing in the project, one of the other reasons is we just need to make sure that we stay kind of within the IRS guidelines as to the borrowed money to make sure, you know, we're above board there. And then item 4A is one that's more relevant for the beginning part of this borrowing plan, okay? So there's, you know, some talk about if you would authorize the financing team for this calendar year to borrow money, that we could borrow up to $15 million this calendar year. What that would do is it would get you startup money for the project, whichever version of the project you decide to move forward with. And because it's 15 million or less in a calendar year, it would allow you to be small issuer exempt, which is bullet 3A, which means that any arbitrage that you earn over the borrowed amount, you can keep it. So let's talk numbers here. So if you go borrow money at 3.5%, okay, and you take that money and you put it in a construction fund account where it's earning 5% or 4.5%, you can earn what's called positive arbitrage, which means the money is actually going to spin off interest, you know, higher than what you borrowed at. If you're small issuer exempt, you can keep those earnings and use them again to minimize the cost of the project. So one of the thoughts as you kick off the project is, should you move forward with $15 million small issuer exempt to take advantage of that, that exception to kick off the project and again, you know, prepare for whatever you decide to move forward with in the future, whether it's 200 million or some version of that going forward. Okay. Now, if we switch to page 5, so this one will be a little bit easier to see, at least on the board. So one of the things we have to pay attention to when you're borrowing, this kind of money is it affordable? Obviously, can it fit into your budget? Okay, and I think Dr. Zerbe is going to talk about that in a slide here towards the end of the presentation. But then the second one is does it fit under your legal borrowing capacity? Pennsylvania state law has a legal borrowing capacity calculation, which we tried to put up here into this graph. But they take 225% of the average of the last 3 years of revenue, and that's what your borrowing capacity is. Okay, so if you look at the blue bar in the middle of the page under 2024 year, it shows that you could borrow up to $284 million under Pennsylvania state law. Now, that's not saying you should do that. It's just saying that you could, right? Then you have to net out the outstanding debt that you already have, which is about $77 million. So that shows you then your estimated remaining borrowing capacity of about $207 million as of the 2024 year, okay? And then what we did was we kind of put it in graphical form below that. The point of this page is to show you if you were to move forward with the $200 million plan as we have it laid out here, and I'm sure it's going to change, right? But let's just say it doesn't. Your borrowing capacity is going to go down as you borrow over different steps, and you're going to kind of hit a low point in your borrowing capacity in 2028 of about $107 million, okay? So that would mean that if other needs popped up at different schools, you could borrow an additional $107 million in the 2028 year, okay? Now, let's say you don't have that problem and you kind of keep moving with status quo after the project's complete, after we borrowed all the money. Then as you see, it starts to go back up because your revenues in theory are going to go up, and you're also going to be paying off the existing debt, which makes your borrowing capacity go up. So the point of this slide is to show you that you can fit it under Pennsylvania state law. You can borrow that $200 million for the project, okay? And you're going to have capacity for other projects should they arise in the future. Again, this chart goes out to 2032 just to show you kind of how, as you go forward, your borrowing capacity increases, again, to make sure that you can borrow for future projects if you would need to. Okay, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add on that slide, anyone? I know that was an important one at Finance Committee. Okay, great. All right, so page 6 has a lot of numbers and it's small. Don't focus so much on exactly what all the numbers are. This is more just to show you the process and the thought pattern behind when you borrow money and you invest the money, okay? So what we're showing you in columns 4 and 5 is the uses of funds. So that's basically what are you spending it on and how quickly are you spending it? This is a monthly page, so it's showing you construction draws that are estimated in column 4 for a $200 million project. Every month you're going to spend a couple $100,000 in the beginning, then you're going to be spending $6-7 million a month towards the end. Okay, so those are the project draws. So in order to fund column 4, we're going to borrow money in specific amounts in column 6. Column 6, 7, 8, and 9 are the sources of funds. So how you're going to pay for the uses of the funds, you're going to have the sources in column 6, which show, in this hypothetical example, you borrow about $15 million December of 2024. Then you're going to spend down that money, okay? Then you borrow about $42 million in October of 25. Then you're going to spend down the money. Then you borrow $80 million in 2026 and so on, so that you can then fully fund this $200 million project. Okay. Now, at the bottom of column 6, you'll notice that the borrowings don't add up to $200 million. They add up to about $196 million. The reason is we're estimating interest earnings in column 8 on the borrowed money of about $3.7 million. So we're using those interest earnings to downsize how much you're going to actually borrow by about $3.7 million. Now, we assumed interest earnings here of about 3.25% over this 4-year period. We don't know what that'll really be. That will depend on what the Fed's doing, right? But we know it's not going to be 5.5 like it was a week ago because the Fed just lowered interest rates. It's probably not going to go back down to 1% like it was a couple years ago. So we kind of picked something in the middle. That number will change, okay? And the way that we account for the change in column 8 is we don't downsize the borrowing until we get to step, 4 or 5 out in 2028. By then we'll know exactly how the project's going, if there's any change orders, exactly how much interest you've earned, so that we can then decide in that final step, how much money do you really need? We're assuming you need 16.2 million now, but when we get there, it could be a little bit more, it could be less. You could decide to use other reserves to shrink that last borrowing. So that last borrowing is important. We call that the cleanup borrowing. It's where you can right size the project, once you kind of know more facts. Okay. So I think, again, this is a busy page, but those are the main points we wanted to hit on here. So we're going to use that estimated 3.7 million to downsize the project.
Zach, just to clarify
Yes, sir.
that the draw schedule was provided by Dewey? Who provided the draw schedule?
Was it
Yeah, that's correct. CHA, our owner's representative, provided the draw schedule as a sample for this project.
Yeah, and again, I'll just say, everything that we always show you in these pages is always estimated, and I'm certain that this draw schedule will change. Maybe not drastically, but it will move around.
I think the point was the shape of the draw, right? It
Yes.
was, I believe, sort of like a bell-shaped curve for the most part, is how the borrowing would lay out.
Yeah, the heavy draws are kind of June of 26 through April of 28, and then it kind of shrinks quickly. Yeah, you're correct. Okay, so page 7 is kind of the main event in this handout. Again, apologies for the small print. So let's start at the left-hand side of this, and we'll kind of walk through it. Now, there's different versions of this that we can run in the future, but again, right now, we're focused on the $200 million project. If you look up in the top, in the green under step 1, what we have in the first one is a placeholder for total reserves in the capital projects fund. We're assuming that through this plan, you spend none of the money in your capital projects fund, okay? When you go over to the right-hand side in column 8, it says there's 18 million remaining at the end of this plan in your capital projects fund. So we're assuming that you spend none of it. That is a conservative assumption. I don't think that's what's really going to happen. So you do have $18 million in reserves that you can put towards this project. If you're going to use them towards the project, we do recommend using them towards the end of the project, both for credit rating reasons and just so you can kind of see how things evolve, right, over the multi-year plan. The second line item shows you available for projects. So it shows you how much we're borrowing each year for the projects. That number ties to the draw schedule we just showed you. The third line item is the estimated interest earnings, which, as we said, is $3.7 million. So when you look in column 6 in the red, it shows you you're borrowing $196 million plus $3.7 million of interest earnings gets you the $200 million needed for the project. In the green, the settlement date, December of 24, October 25, and so on, that shows you the estimated timing. I also expect that to change, okay? Depending on what the market does, there could be a situation where we decide to speed up the borrowings if rates suddenly drop and we say, hey, instead of borrowing 40 million next year, maybe we should borrow 75 because rates came down significantly. Or vice versa, maybe the project slows down, so we slow down the borrowings. Again, these are estimated, an estimated schedule for illustrative purposes. We always want to be flexible with the financing plan because we just want to do whatever gets us the best answer, okay? And then the last one, their term. So these are all expected to be 30-year borrowings. The reason they're 30-year borrowings is because this is a very large project. If you came back and decided to do a $100 million version or $150 million, we would investigate if it makes sense to shorten the term. You don't have to go 30 years. 30 years is the max, but depending on what the project is and how it impacts your budget, we could borrow over a shorter period of time. So then down to the bottom half of the page. So starting left to right in columns 8 and 9, those are your fiscal years. And then the existing debt that we showed you back on the second page of the handout. So again, column 9 is if you do nothing, that's what your debt looks like. So remember how I said your debt falls off pretty rapidly? So what you're going to notice is if you look at columns 10 through 15, the payment structures doesn't look like your mortgage where the payment's the same every year. Okay, some of the payments or most of the payments are lower up front. And then as your existing debt pays off in column 9, that's when we fold in the new debt. That is called a wraparound debt service structure. Again, it's something specific that municipal borrowers can use, and it is very commonly used schools, cities, counties, boroughs, townships, because it has the lowest budgetary impact. Okay, so we use this structure. So columns 10 through 15 are the impact of the debt service to the project. So when you look in columns 6 and 15, that's the red. That's the total of the columns before that. You can see you're going to borrow the $200 million for the project. Your debt service in column 15 is going to kind of run at about $10 million. And then by the time we get out there, it's going to jump up to about 12 million. I'm sorry, I'm looking in. Yeah, no, that's correct. Looking in column 15, it jumps up to about $12 million. And then if you look at the very bottom of the column in the red, it shows you it costs about $420 million over the life, over that 30-year period for the project. And then the number that you'll see after this is all done is column 16. So you'll look at column 16, you'll see one line item in your budget every year that says your debt service is $15,180,000. That'll be built into the budget. And then when you scroll down, you can see it doesn't change. So once you get the mills in place to pay for that $15 million, it's funded in the budget for the next 30 years. Okay? Any questions about that? One other thing, we have column 17, which is a blank column now. I just want to point to that real quickly. Depending on how things evolve with future Act 1 indexes and tax increases, we could use some of the capital reserve in column 17 in order to phase in the projects. So column 17 is kind of like a safety valve that if the Act 1 index is lower than what you expect, you can use some of those reserves in order to help phase the debt service into your budget over maybe an extra year or two if it's needed. You don't have to do that, but it's kind of a backup plan. Okay, so you're going to go from column 9 to column 16 to fund the project. Again, we have conservative estimates in here for interest rates. If we went to go borrow money today, we would do better than what we're showing you here. But one of the points of borrowing over multiple steps is it does hedge your interest rate risk. We'll hit the market at some lower points. We might hit the market at a little bit of a higher point, but you're not just kind of putting all your eggs in one basket with where interest rates are. Page 8 is the graphical version of this. So this page, I think, is really just more helpful to show how it's wrapping in behind your existing debt. So the black is your existing debt. That's the do nothing column. Right, and then as we borrow the multiple steps, you can see how it starts to phase in. And in the back, you can see the bars are larger than in the front. That's the wrap structure taking effect. So I don't think there's a whole lot to point. Nothing's really different about this page. It's just the graphical version. It's a little easier to look at than all the numbers. Page 9, I'll go through this quickly. Some of this we already kind of hit on as we walked through some of the strategies that we'll use. But these are just general, what we call Act 1 millage strategies. So Act 1 came into play back in 2006. It limited the district's ability to increase taxes to fund a project, well, just to fund the budget in general. So after Act 1 of 2006, you had to use certain things in order to make sure you could fit a project into your budget. The first one and the most common one and the most obvious one is you fit it into what the Act 1 allowable index will allow you to increase taxes by. Okay, and that changes every year. It's been high the last few years, and it's expected to, kind of go lower and then level off. But that's step 1, right? That's where you start thinking about this. Step 2, we talked about, that's where you use estimated interest earnings from the construction fund towards the project. So that's that $3.7 million number that we talked about. We do plan to use that. And then you can see 2B talks about the small issuer exemption of 15 million or less. Number 3, contribute cash or refunding savings towards projects. We did talk about how this assumption assumes no cash is being used, but I don't think that's what will really happen. I think some cash will be used for the project. Okay, so that's something that will, as the project moves on, we'll begin to populate, how that's going to play out. We didn't talk about refunding savings. What that is when we refinance your existing debt, and we will have that opportunity, okay? We will use, or you can use the savings generated in order to lower your debt service payments in certain years. So potentially to offset a future tax increase depending on the level of savings. So that'll be a strategy that we use. That'll be further down the road, and some of that will actually happen after the project is completed, but it's something that we will, want to plan for and look at. And just on that topic, we have a page at the very end that we might not get to, but the refinancing that you did authorize the team to proceed back in February, because interest rates have slowly come down since the beginning of the year, that is back in play now, and we expect to potentially price bonds for that refinancing and save, somewhere between $200,000 and $300,000, hopefully in the next few weeks, just depending on if the market cooperates. So I did want to just bring that up as a reminder that that's still out there and is now back at the top of the radar screen. Okay. Number 4, break borrowings into smaller portions. We showed you that. Again, borrowing $200 million all up front comes with a number of problems. Okay, so we have this as a multi-step plan, but we do want to say that we will likely and may very well change the size of the borrowings as we move through that colored page that we just showed you. But breaking it into multiple steps is a very common way to help fit this in under Act 1. The wraparound payment in column 5, and then capitalized interest in column 6. There's 2 forms of capitalized interest. One is where you borrow extra money in order to help make your payments. I don't think we're focused on that one here. I think in this case, it'd be item B, or I'm sorry, if you look through item A, it says or district reserves. That's where we would use some of the capital reserve in order to phase this into your budget. Okay. The rest of these are not planned on being used, and they're used less commonly. Indirect cost savings is where if you're going to save money on electricity, you would use that to help fund the project, or staffing or something like that. A debt restructuring where you take your existing debt and move it around. Capital appreciation bonds, which are a very expensive way to issue debt. And then you have a referendum at the bottom of the page, which is very uncommonly used and very unsuccessful. And you don't need to do that because you can fit this in under the state borrowing limits, and you can fit this in under Act 1. And then the last page of this part of the handout is a timeline. So what this is showing you here, some of these things have already passed. If you kind of scroll down to the middle of the page, we're September 24th to discuss the plan. Now you'll notice on this timeline, there's 2 areas where there's kind of a blue font. Okay, those are the items where the board may take action if it should choose to. So one of them is tonight, and that's where you can authorize the financing team to prepare for the borrowing this year that could be up to $15 million. Okay, so I think that's on the agenda for this evening. And then the other one is down at the bottom, October 29th, which is where, depending on how the deliberations go, you could then have a debt resolution in front of you to vote on, which is the formal action needed in order to borrow that amount of money. Again, I think 15 million is kind of what was mostly discussed at the meeting 2 weeks ago. But I will leave that up to you. And then we would be locking in interest rates according to this timeline sometime, right before Thanksgiving to close the transaction before the end of the year. So any questions about timing?
So I think the second part of this overall presentation is we've received the way financing would occur to address the $200 million borrowing. I think the next part of this presentation is really how does that impact the budget, and how does that impact the budget with the change in the draw schedule, as well as an updated figure associated with the Act 1 index. So if we could, there should be another slide that we want to put up on the screen. And members of the board, you have a copy of that at your table. So for those of you who have been following this discussion for a number of meetings now, you'll recognize that we use this format to outline the revenue and expenditures associated with a 5-year projection on the budget. Obviously, the 24-25 column represents the actual budget for this particular school year. This slide is entitled "The 5-Year Budget Projection, Including $200 Million Borrowing on a sample draw schedule provided by CHA, our owner's representative, and at the projected Act 1 index. Down at the bottom of the slide, you'll see that there's two footnotes. The first is that the Act 1 index is the projected by the independent fiscal office of the state, and that's as of November 2023. And again, the sample draw schedule is from CHA, which is factored into the presentation provided by PFM here this evening. With that said, this slide represents an update to the budget projections that have given the draw schedule and CHA's on building $200 million high school within the projected Act 1 index. As such, this model demonstrates that the district, by maximizing the projected Act 1 index in each of the next 4 years, will, with the exception of 2028-2029 projection, will simply cover the ramping up of the interest and principal associated with $200 million borrowing. For each of these years, there is between 1.6 million and 2.2 million included in each of the budgets for a budgetary transfer to capital. This is typically how we fund capital projects, and in the 2028-29 school year, could reduce that transfer to capital to cover the $700,000 projected shortfall as listed in the red on column under the net change in column 28-29. So as you can see then, there is room within the projected budget to reasonably manage to proceed forward. With that, I think we want to give an opportunity for the board to ask questions of PFM or of myself regarding the financial strategy for this evening. Mr. Winters?
Yeah, so one clarifying question. So for Mr. Willard, and it might be misinterpreting the numbers here on my part, but on slide 7, where you have the total reserves for capital reserves fund, you have $18 million. Is that evaluating our cash related to unallocated, or is truly just our capital reserves fund?
So I believe that's just the capital reserve fund.
Yeah, that includes the existing capital reserve of $11 million and the projected by the time we reach the 2028 year, given the transfer to capital projection.
All right, that helps.
Anything else, Mr. Winters? Okay. Ms. Cleary?
The $3.7 million that you talked about on the estimated interest earnings on a $200 million borrow. My question is, can a school district reinvest that money to earn more money, or is that not something a school district can do?
So this is on page 6, if everyone's looking, back to column 8. So we are assuming that you invest that money at a rate of 3.25, which today is conservative, but 2 years from now could be right on point, or it could be lower than that. You can't take that money and buy Apple stock or something like that, but you can put it in very safe treasury investments, which then yield whatever the market is yielding. So we are assuming that you take the money as borrowed, right? So the first step would be you take column 6, you borrow $15 million, okay? And then if you look right over in column 8, that's assuming that at 3.25%, you're going to earn about $37,000 that first month. And then as you spend that money, you'll see that the earnings go down because you're spending money on the project. So there's less money invested. And then in comes the next borrowing in 10/1/2025 of $42.5 million. So then all of a sudden, when you look in column 8, you'll see the earnings jump from 28,000 and so on to 145. And that's kind of how that process works.
I don't think I asked the question appropriately.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So, no,
Okay.
I apologize. I was really asking the 3.7 million of, if we assume that we're going to earn interest earnings of 3.7 million on this borrow, can we take that 3.7 and reinvest it to make additional money? Can a school district do that?
No. So the way it works, because you're borrowing tax exempt money, and I'm not your lawyer, right? You have a separate bond counsel from Eckerd Siemens that would tell you. But I think what he would tell you is that the money that you earn on the borrowed money must be used towards the project. you can't take that money and then put it in its own reserve fund to spin off operating cash, for example.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Ms. Graff?
Yes, thank you so much for the updated presentation. I will say I do very much appreciate the graphic because I think it really explains when you say we're going to wrap the new debt around the old debt. That didn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
But when I see it in that graphical form, it makes sense that
It's
it
much
sort of
easier to see.
stacks in behind the old debt. So that, thank you for that. I had a question though about the small issuer exemption. So the small issuer exemption applies to the 15 million that we're talking about authorizing to move forward. And again, this authorization tonight would be to authorize you to prepare the documentation, and then you would come back to the board for the final approval for
Correct.
that. But does the exemption only apply until we borrow additional funds above the 15 million? Or is that first 15 million exempt until we use it?
Yes, so it's exempt until you use it. Now, the way, because we're talking about, again, federal tax rules, they think in terms of calendar year. So the way this works is if you borrow 15 million or less by, 12/31 of this year, it would be small issuer exempt, and then it would be small issuer exempt all the way until you spend that 15 million. Then assuming that we would follow this plan, next year you're going to borrow $40-some million, so it would be up and above. So that 42 million would not be small issuer exempt, but the 15 that you did before 12/31/2024 would still be small issuer exempt.
And then you also have the requirement in which you have to spend 85% of the 15 million in the first 3 years that you have.
Correct.
So even though it's tax exempt, you only really have 3 years to spend it.
And it's called a reasonable expectations test. So there is times when people don't spend the money within 85%. If you hit some big delay in the project or something like that, those are reasonable things that happen to a project that wouldn't take you out of compliance with this. But the rule's in place because they don't want people to go borrow money because rates are low, or they don't want people to go borrow money because they can invest it and earn arbitrage and then not really have a project to spend it on.
Yeah. I mean, I could see that being very profitable for the district if we
Sure.
were able to do that.
So we're not doing that. Just to be clear, we're not
We're
doing
not
that,
allowed
yeah.
to do that. And then I had a question on slide 5, where you have the graphic about the borrowing capacity. So I just wanted to confirm that the numbers that you have in the table for 24, 25, 26, and so on, those numbers are included. When you say the debt outstanding, you're including our current debt and then also the debt that we would incur for a $200 million project.
Correct.
So even with the high school project at $200 million, the lowest our potential borrowing capacity goes is that middle sort of 2028 number.
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
And you can see that when you look in that middle box there, you can see your net geo debt outstanding. You can see that starts to go up drastically. That's in conjunction with the borrowings.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Ms. Perdue?
Thank you for the presentation. I don't have questions. I think it's clear to me, but I think considering that this is something your firm do, I figure maybe the slides will be presented a little bit differently. I'm just wondering, and I don't know if because you don't have animations, just because some of them are very small to see some of the numbers. And I know you bring us to it to focus on, you call out the ones that are critical, but I'm wondering, is there another way to share it, in the future? Are you able to do animations? I'm thinking even slide or page 6 or 7. Are you able to animate it so you can make those boxes bigger as you go through it?
We've struggled with that for 48 years.
Okay.
So, sometimes we show up in places want a summary page, for example, this was a new one that we did, but then other times people want to see all the numbers. Maybe we can talk with Dr. Zerbe before the next presentation and figure out where we want to highlight, something specific and blow it up. I do think it's important, that we show you kind of all the backup numbers, even though some of it might put you to sleep, but just so you can really see how it works. But yeah, we can try to do a better job of that.
Yeah, and it's not really a matter of putting to sleep. I think it's hard to, I can imagine if I'm in the audience and I don't have it, it's hard to see if I want to be able to follow along because it's so small. So I was just wondering if they had like a magnifier, option when you're presenting that you can, do. So I'll be interested to see if that's something that's possible in the future for some of these presentations.
Yeah, no, I can't disagree with you.
Yeah. All right, that's it. I think I don't have any questions in reference to the information, so thank you.
Any other questions to my left? Ms. Alston?
Hi, thank you for this presentation and for incorporating a lot of the feedback from the Finance Committee into this to help everybody understand. I really appreciate
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
I just was wondering on slide 7, where it shows all the different steps, column 19, the millage impact, just can you help me with the arithmetic? Like,
Yeah, so
What-
we didn't really hit on that one. So when you start in column, so again, you're going from column 9, so we're on page 7, this colored summary page.
yeah,
You're
can we
gonna
get
go
that up
from-
on the screen, please?
So you're going to go from column 9 to column 16 when all the dust settles and you've borrowed 200 million, right? And then so columns, because you borrowed the money in multiple steps over multiple years, you'll notice column 16 starts to, I don't want to say gradually go up, it jumps up, multiple years until all of the new debt is phased into your budget, which happens, right around the 2029 budget year. Okay. So some places like to think of it in terms of dollars. Others like to think of it in terms of what is the millage impact. So if you look at the footnote number 4, we assume that 1 mil at the district is equal to about $2.5 million. So we're taking the annual increase in the debt service and dividing it by the value of a mil in order to show column 19, which is just, it's a different way to say, instead of you saying your debt service goes up $600,000 a year, you can also think of it, I don't know how you all talk about it, but you also might think of it in terms of millage, which is what column 19 is showing you. Is that helpful?
So can you just take me through the arithmetic? Because I mean, we don't often talk about things in terms of millage, but I know that millage is important to everybody who pays
Sure.
taxes. So if a mill,
So
There is-
in
is-
column 20, or so in go back to column 9. So in the 2026 budget year, so the second year, you're at 8,491,000. Or no, I'm sorry, look at number 20, I'm sorry, budget year 2025, you're at 9,040,000 for your debt service. Okay. Then the next year, you're going to go up to $10.9 million. So that's an increase of, about $1.9 million over that 1-year period. Okay. The value of 1 mil is equal to $2.5 million using round numbers. So that's about 0.7 mils on a millage equivalency basis, that 1.9
okay, so
million.
you take the difference from the column above it,
Correct.
and that's the mills. Okay,
Yep.
thank you very much.
Any other questions to my left? Any other questions down to my right? Mr. Mirsky?
So again, on page 7, so in total, we're borrowing $196 million, and the total principal and interest payback at the end of 30 years is $423 million,
Correct.
round numbers, correct?
Yep.
I did notice that it was slightly lower ratio than some of the previous presentations. I know some of the earlier presentations were like 2.5% payback. This is about 2.15. Is there a reason
So
with the change?
we did change this plan significantly from 2 Tuesdays ago because we didn't have a draw schedule 2
Yep.
weeks ago, and now we had a draw schedule which kind of more clearly laid out how we think this might happen, which shifted when we borrowed money.
Right.
And then, so it also shifted, the total interest payments over the life. So this was a little bit cheaper because we borrowed money
Right.
faster.
Would you consider that 2.15 ratio fairly normal in today's market?
Yeah, I mean, again, we're assuming you're borrowing here, at 4.5%. In reality, you're borrowing probably 1% lower than that if we did this today, if we did all this today. And you are borrowing over 30 years. So some schools might borrow shorter. So therefore, the total cost would be less. It's kind of, if you think home mortgage, most people do a 30-year mortgage because it's a more affordable payment, even though you're paying more over the life. But if someone has the ability to borrow over 15 years, right, you're going to maybe have higher payments up front, but you have less payments over the life. So it does depend on the specific project and the specific district. But in this case, this looks fairly normal.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Winters?
Yeah, and we are going to go to the credit rating discussion as well.
We certainly can.
Yeah. So I just want to, the $15 million, I know this is the question in the room, is the $15 million, if there's a decision later on in October not to proceed with a new high school, but go with a different, that we estimate eyeball of $100 million. Can this $15 million be used to that $100 million?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So part of the reason we were talking about 15 million for this calendar year was, our understanding was, you're either going to do a $200 million project or you're going to do a $100 million project, but you're going to do something. So by doing the 15 million this year, you can take advantage of the small issuer exemption, knowing that you're going to need this money regardless of which option you ultimately decide you're going to move forward with. So the 15 million could be used for whatever project that you're going to do in the near term. I think that was your question. Yeah, okay.
And then also, Dr. Zerby, the update on your slide that you had presented from what was presented in the town hall meetings, you used the projected Act 1 that was from the independent fiscal office. And if I understand that pretty much everyone except year one is lower, so year one is higher, and the next 3 years are lower because of the Act 1.
Yeah, so the projection from the independent fiscal office projected the numbers as they're listed on that slide, with 4% being for the 25-26 year, 3.6 for the following year, 3.2 and 3.1. And so happens to be that projection is accurate. So for this fiscal year, the Act 1 index for Methacton, for the 25-26 year, the Act 1 index for Methacton is 4%. And you're correct that the original presentations that we had, A, did not have a draw schedule in a bell-shaped curve, and B, did not include these Act 1 indexes from that fiscal office projection. But they do now, and as you can see, we're able to proceed forward, knowing that we have levers in terms of using district cash to be able to take care of the last year.
Okay, thank you. And the last question, Dr. Willard, congratulations.
Yeah.
Mr. Willard, you commented on our current debt dropping off from 9 million down to 4.8 from a local effort, so down $4 million by the year 2029. What do other districts face if they have a debt service that is sort of stable for the next 10 years?
Yeah.
So if they had a much lower, say, even if they had $7 million of debt for the next 15 years, what do they face as obstacles?
Sure. So let's just say it's a district that's comparable to Methacton as far as budget size goes, right? So similar budget, if your debt service runs flat at $9 million for the next 15 or 20 years, I mean, you're facing an unaffordable project. You're going to have to change the scope of the project because you just can't do $200 million and phase it into your budget. You were looking at delaying the project. We have a couple of schools that are just going to have to push the project off for a number of years because, again, they can't fit it in under the current assumptions because their debt, is running level. I mean, those would be the two main ones. You do, again, I think I said this before, you do have a good situation where your debt falls off very rapidly, which is, I don't know if it's coincidental timing or just good timing for a sizable capital project.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Winters, I'm not sure if this helps you with your question, but typically, if we were finding ourselves in the neighborhood of $4 million, $3 million, $2 million in terms of debt service as a decline, as a decreasing factor, if we were to wanting to borrow $200 million for a high school, say 10 years from now, where we had a debt service of $2 million, it'd be very difficult under the existing Act One constraints ever to get there. So you would never have that opportunity to build a school in that scenario. Any other question, Ms. Graff?
Yeah, I have a question on the 5-year budget projection slide. I just wanted to make sure I understand that on this slide, instead of us providing a projected tax increase percentage at the bottom, we're assuming that the tax increase would be comparable to the Act One index. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so this slide basically is telling us that with the projected increases in our taxes, it is sufficient under the Act One index to be able to fund the project.
That's correct.
Except for the last year.
That's correct.
And does this debt and transfer row, that's essentially where we have the funding for the project, right? That's where the borrowing comes in.
Yeah, so on the PFM slides, I believe the overall local effort, those numbers in the local effort are in the debt and transfer column, plus
So they
additional
match.
leases that are incurred in there as well.
Right. Okay. And the other question I guess I had was the debt and transfer row that's on this budget projection slide doesn't take into account any of the interest earnings for that last year.
It does not.
Okay. So those interest earnings, if we held them till the last year, could offset the $700,000 of overage with the $3 million of interest.
Well, so there's different ways to use the interest earnings, and we would just need to check with bond counsel on that. The most common way is you just borrow less money at
Right.
the end. You can use the interest earnings to kind of act as the capitalized interest that we talked about, maybe make a debt payment. So there's different ways to think about that.
And one other question, I guess, these Act One indexes are projected. So let's say in 27, 28, the Act One index that's projected at 3.2 actually comes out at 3.1. Could we use our capital projects fund to offset the borrowing in that year to reduce our tax increase to get below the Act One index if we needed to?
Well, we could actually do two things. One, we have existing capital project funds right now, as I mentioned earlier, $11 million. And we could use that to offset it. But we also could reduce the transfer to capital that is built into each one of these years to offset that cost as well.
And do you know, and I apologize for asking you this off the cuff, do you know what that transfer to capital estimate is on an annual basis?
On an annual basis, it goes from $1.6 million in the first year to 2.2 in the last year.
So that's basically the money the district is putting away as a savings account fund for projects in the future. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And we can use that to fund any projects in the district, obviously not necessarily operating expenses, but capital projects.
Would be for any capital project, correct?
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions for PFM this evening or Ms. Alston?
I know we have gone over this. I'm just asking it out loud here, but are there other large projects on the horizon that could interfere with this plan?
So one of the things that we had asked our owner's representative to do was to take a look at our 10-year master facilities plan, and they are currently working with our facilities and working with our assistant superintendent to organize a presentation for, I believe, to be delivered on October 22nd to the Board of School Directors, and obviously as well in October to the Property Committee of the Board to show how those projects would be, I'll call them, moved within that timeline so that A, we can manage projects that we know we need to address, and B, that we can fund the projects that we know we need to address.
Okay, great. Well, hopefully this was helpful for everyone, and we'll wait to hear from Dr. Zerbe.
Thank you very much. Madam Vice President, that ends our guest and scheduled speakers presentations for this evening. We will then go into reports, and then from there into public comment following reports.
Are
Yes,
we going to do the rating discussion presentation?
we are. So I just want to make sure our presenters, we have the slideshow ready. Bring that back up. So we want to go to slide 11, I believe.
It's
Okay.
13 is where it starts.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
There we go.
So I don't know that we need to go through each one of the slides. A lot of the stuff that we went through 2 weeks ago, we kind of came back and gave you some additional information. But one of the things that we think about with the financing team and the folks at PFM is when you're thinking about a large project like this, you have a very good rating going in. You want to make sure you come out on the other side with an equally good rating, not having jeopardized the other stuff that you want to do on a regular basis here at the school district, programs and all the good stuff that you're doing. And so the rating presentation that we just actually walked through yesterday kind of said a lot of the same things that you're going to see in these few slides. It shares with you how you stack up relative to some of your peers in the neighborhood. But it's looking at Methacton School District through the eyes of someone in New York who doesn't know anything about you. They simply compare you and the numbers that you can put forth in your budget and compare it to metrics across the country. Clearly, you stack up very well. This shows that you have a AA rating from Moody's before we go into this project. That's a very, very, if you look at the right-hand table, that's a very, very, very good rating relative to districts that are rated in Pennsylvania. You can see the first bullet point that there's 27 schools rated AA2 by Moody's, and you're one of 72 school districts in Pennsylvania rated in the AA category. So that speaks volumes actually about the good work that the administration and the board has done here over the years in keeping the financial house in order. So that's a really good starting point. That's very hard to achieve. I think I'm not going to steal Ali's thunder here, but there are some slides in here that speak to the other metrics and how hard it is to get to the AA category. So you should be very proud of that. The other bullet points on this page speak to the rating scorecard that you have before we go into this project and some of the credit strengths and challenges that Moody's outlines in that report. It says you have an above average resident wealth and income level, consistent and strong operating surpluses. Some of the challenges would be obviously if you're thinking about a $200 million project, what the stress might look like on your budget. And so that's really, that was largely the conversation 2 weeks ago, which is, we call it the stress test of, okay, we know we have a good rating currently. What happens if we stress test your financials and add $200 million of debt to it? And really what the next couple of slides tell you is that you're going to be just fine. You're going to have that good rating. You're likely to keep that rating. There might be some downward pressure on it. But the message to the rating agencies is that if you have a plan and you stick to that plan and you plan accordingly and you share that plan with them, you're likely to come out on the other side. Again, as Zach mentioned, the plan is going to have some changes along the way. How you phase in mills clearly will change along the way. But I think if you have a good plan going in and they know it, that's better than kind of flying by the seat of your pants and not having given much thought to how you're going to endeavor to borrow $200 million. So again, I don't know that we need to spend the time to go through. If you want to go to the next slide, slide 14, I think one of the most important things there is that most school districts in Pennsylvania are rated A2 and above. And you can see the bar chart. I know I'm a visual person as well, where you would stack up as a AA rated school district relative to most of the other school districts in Pennsylvania. So I think that speaks volumes. The lower right-hand portion of this chart shows you again the other Montgomery County school districts, some rated higher, some rated lower. And a lot of that's a function of how much cash you maintain. One of the things that I would second to what Zach said is, I think we want to be very mindful of your cash balances and the use of those reserves and keeping them until the end. What the scorecard tells us is that will give you a lot of flexibility as you plan out your financings over the next 3, 4, or 5 years, and keeping that cash to allow you to roll with either Act 1 indexes that aren't what you were expecting, budgets that were a little more challenging than others. And so keeping your cash till the end will give you a great deal of flexibility as you navigate the next 3 or 4 years. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ally to walk through a couple of slides briefly, and you can ask questions as she goes through.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to start on slide 15. So I think there was a desire to understand better what actually goes into a Moody's rating and what components you can control and not control within that rating. So tonight I just wanted to quickly run through what those components are and how they're calculated for you. So you'll see on this page, there's 4 components that go into the district's what they call above the line rating: the economy, leverage, financial performance, and the institutional framework. The economy section is worth 30% of your rating, and those are all factors that the district itself cannot control. It's driven by resident income, full value per capita, and your enrollment trend. Those things are statistically not something that you can influence, so those will be what they are. The other one you cannot influence is the institutional framework, which accounts for 10% of your total rating score. That's a score that Moody's gives to all Pennsylvania school districts, which is an A. Everybody, all 500 plus school districts in Pennsylvania have an A rating on the institutional framework. You can't change it. That's just how they view the support of the state for the district and the framework here in Pennsylvania. But the 2 areas you can control are the leverage and the financial performance sections. And that accounts for 60% of your total overall rating. And you'll see there that the 4 categories that they look at are the long-term liabilities ratio, the fixed cost ratio, the available fund balance ratio, and the net cash ratio. Those are all simply driven by leverage and cash on hand. So we'll walk through a little bit in further detail on the next page how those metrics are actually calculated, since these are the 4 pieces that the district itself can control. The financial performance there you see is worth 30% of your score, with your available fund balance ratio being worth 20%. These are numbers that come directly from Moody's. They source them directly from the district's 2023 audit. So that's where these numbers all stem from. So you can see that the available fund balance ratio is nothing more than your available fund balance divided by your operating revenue. And that gives you that 7.1% that Moody's has on their scorecard. Below that, you'll see the net cash ratio, which is 10% of your score. That's simply the net cash you have on hand divided by your operating revenue, which gives you that 17.7% metric. Again, these are all just coming from the fiscal 23 audit. Moody's does reserve the right to make adjustments for things like giving you credit for outside reserves or making other adjustments for one-time expenses and things like that. But these are the numbers directly from Moody's for your district, for your scorecard that they've most recently updated. On the right-hand side, you can see the leverage ratio, also worth 30%. The long-term liabilities ratio is 20% of that 30%. And you'll see the calculation there, which is just your outstanding debt. Again, this is as of 6/30/2023, the number that was in your audit, so it might not be your currently outstanding debt, but that's how the metric was calculated. And then they add to that your adjusted net pension liability and your adjusted net OPEB liability and divide the sum of those by your operating revenue. And that gives you that 169.8%. Then the fixed cost ratio is probably the most convoluted ratio and hardest to calculate, because they use their own internal metrics to calculate what they call the tread water payment. That is noted here. It's just an indicator that indicates Moody's estimate of the pension contributions necessary to prevent underfunding of the pension liability year over year, assuming that all the actuarial assumptions are met. So they do have a report where they outline how that number gets calculated, but I didn't want to go into those type of weeds here tonight. We can certainly provide that if you're interested. They also calculate your implied debt service. They do this based on a 20-year level debt amortization. They do that for everybody. That's how they compare you to somebody in Ohio or Texas or somewhere else that might not have a wraparound debt service structure available to them. So they just take your outstanding debt and do it over a 20-year period to get that number. So they recalculate that. And then they take your OPEB contribution and total all three of those up to get your adjusted fixed costs of 12.4 million, and then divide that by the operating revenue, which gives you the available fund balance ratio of 10%. I know that's a lot. And if there's questions on that, I'm happy to take questions, but I think if you source back to your audit, you'd see where all those numbers come from. On the following slide, this is your actual scorecard and where all those numbers go into. So you'll see there on the left-hand side, there's the 2023 fiscal year audited financial statements column. This is exactly matches to Moody's scorecard that they've provided to you the last time they evaluated you. All of those values in that column match to the previous slide where we just calculated them. And you can see there that once they weight and score all those columns out, you score out at a AA3 rating in that blue box at the bottom. Moody's does reserve the right to what they do call notch you. So for other factors, like they like where you're geographically located, or you have other outstanding factors in your favor, they can move you up or down depending on how they view you. And clearly they view you as stronger than a AA3. So they notch you up to that AA2 currently. So we would expect that to continue. We did do a post-financing plan where we layered on that $200 million worth of leverage. We're pointing out with the red arrows that those are the 4 pieces of your ratios that we can influence. We're holding everything else constant just because we have no idea what your enrollment trend's going to do or your resident income and the like. But we do know an estimate of how that leverage will affect the district going forward. We also assume that you do keep that cash on hand, and this is the important part of this analysis, is that we're going to not spend that cash till the end. We're going to keep it on hand. We're not assuming it grows, which would be a positive influencing factor, and if in fact that is the case. But we're not going to spend it and keep it in hand so that we can try to minimize the impact of the additional leverage on the rating ratios. So you can see here that even when we layer in that debt, it does show a 1-notch downgrade or downward pressure on the rating. However, again, we've kept a lot of these other assumptions static. Those will be mitigating factors to the downward pressure. And if we do this methodically and stick to a plan, as Scott mentioned, we'll be able to tell that story to the rating agency and hopefully come out at the end of this with the same rating that you currently have, as long as we appropriately and properly manage the project all the way through with the rating agency. The next slide is just some rating considerations and takeaways. I think Scott went over this when he was here last. Again, just cash is king with the rating agencies. They want to see that you have that flexibility if something goes wrong with the project, it doesn't quite work out the way we thought it was. Going to timing changes, whatever the case may be, which is why we always just say, just keep the cash on hand till the end. We're not telling you not to spend it on the project, just don't spend it until you're at the final step there or the cleanup borrowing that Zach mentioned, because that will be favorable for your rating process the whole way through this project. And again, the higher your rating, the lower the interest rate you're able to borrow at. So that's why it's so important that we try to keep the rating as high as possible. And then, having a plan. They love a plan. They love when boards stick to a plan. They love to see an outline of how this is all going to lay out for them. So we always present that to them. We update them as it changes, and we're really focused on making sure we have really good communication with them going forward. And then the other thing we just always like to do if we can is a site visit for a project of this magnitude. Just as Scott mentioned, these folks sit around the country, Dallas, Chicago, New York. They don't know where Methacton School District sits. They don't understand the local economy. So we like to bring them here. It gives them a real sense of what it's like, what the local vibe is, how close you are to certain things. The need for the project. They can see why you're doing this. That all helps. So we would recommend that if you do embark on a large capital project. And then the final slide is just those 4 ratios that I had mentioned and we had gone over that you can control. I wanted to show you where you stack up against some of your peers. So these are other AA2 rated school districts in Pennsylvania that are the ones that are kind of geographically closest to you. And you can see here then how you stack up in terms of each one of these ratios against your peers. You can see that on the 2 ratios on the top, the available fund balance ratio and the net cash ratio, you're kind of towards the lower end. And again, that's not problematic, but it's why we want to keep the cash on hand. It helps us tell that story and bolster that going forward. And if we can grow it, I know we have projected the 18 million by the end of the plan. That's even better. And then the long-term liabilities and fixed cost ratios, you kind of fit squarely in the middle on those 2 of these selected peers. So, adding the leverage for a needed project isn't going to hurt us as long as we continue to stick to the plan, put the necessary increases in place, keep the cash, and kind of roll along telling the story to the rating agencies. That was a lot. And so I will open it up for questions if anybody has any.
Questions for the financing team? Mr. Winters?
Yeah, thank you for doing this. I think it really does show, and it's an important aspect to understand what's going to happen. And it's not just gut feel, but based on math. But if you can go back to slide 17, please. So this shows the before and after. So one just small question, our rating related to long-term liabilities ratio goes down, but you have the value staying the same. I assume that second value is not correct, the 169.8?
That is a typo. You are correct. That would go.
Okay,
that would
thank you.
change for sure.
Actually,
I apologize.
Dr. Regina found it. And then I think it's important also to just highlight the available fund balance ratio at 20%. So that's our unallocated fund balance, right? Primarily.
Yes.
And it's 7.1%. Our policy is to keep it at 7%. As Methacton, I think we're allowed to go 8.5%. I'm not sure exactly, but that's the limitation of the state. But it is our lowest rating today at BAA. And we go to, despite that, we go to a 5.8 and we go to a BAA or AAA, right?
A BAA3. And the reason for that is we're holding that cash balance, that fund balance static, and your revenue is growing. So the denominator is growing while your numerator is staying the same. Hopefully that's not the case, but we just want to show like a worst case scenario situation here.
Yeah, no, I understand. I think it's also point out that we couldn't really improve it though. I believe if we moved our unallocated fund balance to 8%, that it's when it's compared to other school districts around the country, that it would still be our lowest rated piece at 20%. Is that correct?
Yep.
Thank you.
Other questions from members of the board? Ms. Cleary?
Thank you. I do have some clarification questions that'll help me understand this a little better. My understanding is different than or it's not as sophisticated as perhaps Mr. Winters or the rest of the Finance Committee. So the reason why the rating is important, right, is because the higher that is, the lower the interest rate on the money we borrow, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I just want to better understand the downgrade factor. So currently we're at a AA rating, and I think I'm hearing you say that if we were to borrow a $200 million borrowing scenario, since that's what we're talking about tonight, are you saying it's likely that we would be downgraded?
I think that there's downward pressure on the rating that we see, but I think we've been conservative in assuming that everything else stays static. So I believe that if properly managed and we continue to put debt service into place in the budget for the project, like Zach's outlined here, that I think we have a very good shot of maintaining the rating as long as we do those things, because we're not accounting for that in the metrics.
Okay. Go
The
ahead.
other thing I would add to that is the stress would come at the end of the project. And so I think the plan would be to maintain your AA rating as long as we possibly can. And to put it in perspective, if your AA rating carries a 3% interest rate, a AA, one notch downgrade is about 10 to 15 basis points. So we're not talking the difference between going from 3 to 5%. It's really a very small change in interest rates. And so one of the other things that we want to be mindful of whenever we advise clients with the help of the financial advisor is it really worth it to take you to the AAA rating, to hoard cash or to build areas of your budget that really don't produce additional meaningful savings to you? And so we would say it's likely that you may see some downward pressure at the end of this plan, but even if you do, you've already done the lion's share of your financing over the next 3 or 4 years before that would happen.
Okay, so I think I'm hearing you say, just bear with me, that if there is going to be a rating downgrade as a result of the pressure, it's going to come at the end of the borrowing. Okay, and if it does come, I just want to go to if it does come. I hear you saying that it may not. If it does, would you imagine that, to your best professional opinion, would that be that it would drop once or would drop twice?
The scorecard's showing a 1-notch downgrade.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understood it. And so what is there any other negative implication to the district if we do drop that 1 notch?
No.
No. Again, you're at a very, very, relative to your peers, the AA rating is very, very strong. And again, you're doing a lot of other good stuff around the district and building your financials. And so taking on a project of this size and feeling some downward pressure is not unusual. The other folks around you, the Upper Marions, the Muhlenberg, large projects of this size, I would not be worried about that downward pressure. Again, I think if you have a plan and stick to the plan, you'll be just fine.
Okay, thank you.
One important point to note is that all of your existing debt is fixed. And if you get downgraded, the interest rate on the existing debt does not change. Good point. It's only on future debt. So when we talk about 10 to 15 basis points or 1/10%, that would be on some future borrowing. Existing debt is fixed. That doesn't change.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Winters?
Just to add, though, I believe Methacton was 1 notch lower about 5 or 6 years ago anyway. So we just, in the last half dozen years, moved up. Is that correct? I believe.
Yeah.
Right? Yes.
I can't remember exactly when you were upgraded, but it did happen, in the last 6, 7 years. That sounds right.
Any other questions to my right? Seeing none to my left. Ms. Purdue?
I just had one, and I guess I was looking at the same slide that's up in reference to what was presented earlier in 2028 timeframe when we see the peak. Do we expect, I don't know if you know, like what that rating will be at that time? Because from what you're saying is that I guess you mentioned that the downward pressure is more towards the end. So in the 2028 timeframe, we still expect to be wherever the rating that may be at the time that we borrow or close enough, or wherever it drop a notch, we don't expect to see it drop several notches down.
Correct. Yeah, I think if we did see a 1 notch downgrade, it would occur somewhere closer to the 27, 28 planned borrowings in that time frame. And then from there on out, we would know exactly what the plan is, and I wouldn't expect any further downward pressure. You'd be firmly within the next rating level, I think, based on what we know today.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions to my left? Seeing none. Thank you. Appreciate your time this evening. Certainly, this information, as I said earlier this evening, will be included into the October 2nd presentation, and we will continue with that process. One thing before we have our financing team leave, on the agenda this evening is the request for doing a borrowing for a refinancing for the that was already given parameter resolution. So Zach, could you just refresh the board real quick on that refinancing?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I don't think we need anything from the board tonight on the refinancing. But if you remember back in, it was either February or March of this year, you did have a number of existing bonds that were callable. Interest rates over the past 2 years did not warrant the ability to refinance them and save any money. Since interest rates have declined, it made sense to take those bonds and set them up in what's called a parameters resolution, which is kind of the final official board action, so that as interest rates declined this year, we didn't know when this was going to happen, but we assumed that interest rates were going to come down at some point, that you could then refinance the debt to save some money. Now, the bonds that we're talking about already have pretty low interest rates on them, that range between 2% and 4%. Okay. We're only going to refinance certain maturities that save you money. So we're probably not going to refinance all of the bonds that we set up, only the ones that are going to produce interest rate savings. And based on interest rates from about 2 weeks ago, we're projecting net savings of about $255,000, which would then come in the form of most of the savings in the 25 budget year, and then the rest kind of over the remaining 10 years of the bonds. One important point is, when we refinance debt, we do not change the final maturity of any of the debt. You're still going to pay off the debt in the exact same time frame that we originally had the debt structured. You're just going to take the old higher rate of 4% and we're going to change it to a 350, or whatever the numbers shake out to be. So again, I don't think we need anything from the board. We do expect, unless rates jump here in the next 2 to 3 weeks, we do expect to probably have that completed in the next 2 or 3 weeks, at which point, Dr. Zerbe will obviously know, and we'll have those savings locked in for you. Okay.
Thank you, Zach. Are there any questions from members of the board on that particular matter? Mr. Winters?
Just to confirm, the 255 is net of fees and commissions and so forth.
Yeah, so it's net of fees, and it's also net of any state reimbursement that you get, because as we mentioned before, some of your old existing bonds get state reimbursement. And so when you save money, the state wants their share of that savings. So that's the net number.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Oh, Ms. Alston?
Just curious, is this a one-time thing that can happen, or could this happen again in the future should interest rates continue to decline?
So all of the bonds that we're talking about here have already been refinanced once or twice over their life. This is probably the last kind of bite of the apple, we'll call it, for these bonds. All of the debt that we just spoke about, if you do move forward with a plan like that, all of those bonds will also be callable in the future, and we would fully anticipate refinancing those for savings in the future.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Madam Vice President, we have then, that ends the guest and scheduled speakers. We'll move on to reports and to public comment on action items.
Thank you to all the presenters. Committee reports are attached, and so we will start with Mrs. Washington with the DEI report.
Yes, good evening, Dr. Zerbe and school board directors. It's certainly great to be back after a summer vacation to share updates with you from the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And so while we were on vacation over the summer, the work did continue as our building liaisons worked with myself, the K-12 Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Climate Counselor, to plan events for this academic year centered around cultivating a culture of belonging. All of our schools had a great start to the year. Our building leaders welcomed our Methacton students into their buildings with assemblies or town halls to create a community of belonging for all. And all staff received a white jersey to wear to school events, and embrace being part of the Methacton community. We will continue supporting our student leaders to bring positive change in our schools. The Montgomery County Intermediate Unit will be working in collaboration with Montgomery County Schools to foster a transformative series of sessions called Dreaming Forward. This new initiative is aimed at building self-awareness and relationship skills, making responsible and impactful decisions, and cultivating and leveraging leadership. These sessions will provide 5 high school students with a unique opportunity to grow as a leader and become a catalyst for positive change in our school community. The first session will be in the month of October, and we are looking forward to receiving favorable feedback from our students. Today, the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit offered professional development to K-12 teachers, administrators, coaches, ELD specialists, counselors, and DEI coordinators or leaders on supporting multilingual learners. This program, called And Justice for ELs, A Leader's Guide to Creating and Sustaining Equitable Schools, was led by Ayanna Cooper, who is a former U.S. Department of State English language specialist and also the author of the book. She shared actionable strategies and best practices for establishing collaborative relationships with linguistically diverse families and communities, again, as we work towards fostering a culture of belonging and inclusivity. So I'm excited to enter into another year here at Methacton with Methacton Pride, because we are Methacton. So thank you.
Thank you very much. We will move on with reports. The next one is the MCIU. MCIU actually met in August. Their next meeting is actually tomorrow. The August meeting was a lot of administrative, but preparing for the start of the new school year for MCIU all across the district. One thing that I wanted to highlight that is of interest and a lot of excitement is that they will be doing a building dedication for their new MCIU Discovery Center located at 375 Morris Road in Lansdale. There's a lot of excitement around that. That will take place on Wednesday, October 16th, starting at 12:30 and with a formal building dedication at 1:00 p.m. And if people are interested, I think we extended it out to all board members, but I think the public can also look into it by checking on the MCIU website and registering or providing a reservation by October 4th for that event. And I will provide an update at next month's meeting. I do want to add on to it. Usually we have our board reports attached. I did want to say a special thank you to the Methacton High School counselors for providing the college and career readiness bulletin, creating that bulletin for students and parents. I think it's a very great pamphlet that they have put together. I do want to encourage students and parents, if you have even rising seniors, but those currently in senior year, if they're looking into navigating the process, I think they did very well with putting that together. Do want to encourage you because it's also available on the counselor's virtual website. So please take a look at that. They presented at committee this month and it was really great, and looking forward to having that being used to help all our students and parents navigating through the process. I will now go on to the North Monco, Ms. Austin and Mr. Mursky.
Okay. The North Monco Technical Career Center Joint Operating Committee met on Monday, September 16th. At the beginning of the year, North Monco Tech welcomed about 1,180 students to the school, including some in new programs such as sports rehabilitation and physical therapy. We did see a presentation offering short and long-term strategies around North Monco Tech enrollment and the capacity and the wait list that we currently do have at the school. The message is, in general, the wait list is down and is being worked on. And it was also our first in-person meeting with our new superintendent of record, Dr. Barbara Russell from Perkiomen Valley, and all agenda items were approved as presented.
Thank you. And we will have our student board representatives officially, we'll have them take an oath. So I'm looking forward to working with them and hearing their reports and getting to know them as we work through the school year with them. And with that, we will open it up for the foundation, Ms. Delaney.
Good evening. I'd like to take a moment to extend our deepest appreciation to everyone who helped make the Race Back to School Methacton 5K run and walk on September 15th at Hebner Park such a tremendous success. Thank you to our 200 runners and walkers for your participation, and congratulations to our top finishers. To our amazing volunteers, we couldn't have done it without you. And a special thanks to our generous sponsors and donors. Because of your support and participation, we raised substantial funds that will directly benefit the Methacton Backpack Program, helping us to continue to make a positive impact in those in need. So thank you. There's a lot of pictures on our site. It was really a good day. Second, we're also incredibly excited to announce the honorees for the 2024 Apex Award. These individuals embody the very best of the Methacton spirit. This year's recipients are, for the Alumni Award, Chris Drummond, class of 1986. The Community Advocate is Fran Held of Mitzvah Circle. The Educator Awards are Matt Alzamora and Luann Milkey. And our Legacy Award, who is an alumni, an advocate, and an educator, is Karen Flugfelder, class of 1967. We're also thrilled to have Cindy Drew, a Methacton alumni and successful media personality, as our MC. So join us in celebrating these outstanding individuals on November 14th at Jefferson Golf Course. You can get tickets at methactonfoundation.org/apex. And lastly, our fall grant cycle is underway, and we invite all staff to submit creative ideas. Last year, we funded over 19 projects and awarded $280,000 to the school district.
Thank you very much. And it was a great day at the back to school. I was happy to see that many people turn out. Hopefully that event continues to bring in more people from the community. Thank you. And now we'll have the superintendent's report. Dr. Zerbe.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. This evening, there are two advisements on the agenda for your information, and the monthly Right to Know report is on the agenda as well. And you'll note that that is on there from July 1 through current date. Of this current month, we've spent $8,248.41 for a total year-to-date of $36,419.05 on Right to Know requests, with a year-to-date total of appeals 2, fulfillment of request 11, and new request 9. Are there any questions on any of that information from members of the board? Ms. Clary?
Sorry, what's the total that the district
The
spent?
total year-to-date is $36,419.05.
That's the total, but then you gave a bunch of other numbers. Do we add those on top?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
You said, does the
So
30?
I said the current month is a total of $8,248.41. But the cost year-to-date with all of the expenses for all the months
All
from
in.
July 1 forward, all in, is $36,419.05. That includes three things. One, the cost for Right to Know specialists, the assistant superintendent that oversees the Right to Know process, and the legal costs associated with Right to Know.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And that ends my report for this evening.
Thank you. And with that, we will move to public comment. The board will now take comments on board action items. This is an opportunity for residents to comment on matters that are to be decided upon as outlined in the agenda. The board asks that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. The Board of School Directors may choose to respond to matters following conclusion of the comments on board action items. Thank you.
Jim Malik, Worcester, talking about item 10D, the bond proposal. Don't do it. Since I only have 3 minutes, I got to make this short. Dave, you should go. You should take Paul with you. Shouldn't be here. Shouldn't. The total cost of this project is $425 million. And from what I saw, you thought we can afford it. I disagree. Perspective, you could buy 20 F-14 Tomcats for that amount of money. May as well just load up a carrier. It's crazy. Thank you for a presentation that none of us could see, but I guess we don't have to see it. We just have to pay for it. I mean, what was that? None of us could see it. Where's the plan for these bonds? Where's the plan? Where's the amount of money you're going to borrow? It's like, okay, go ahead. Just, write it up. It's ridiculous. How much are you voting to borrow? How much? What's the number? What are the costs and fees associated with the borrowing? Because we heard, $3.6 million in interest. Problem is, you got $3 million of fees and costs, legal costs associated with them issuing the bond. So it's a wash. Doesn't help us out. And what projects? Can you show us the projects? You've told us it's the master plan. They're talking like it's a new high school. So is this borrowing also linked to the new high school? Didn't explain any of that to us as the taxpayer. I heard this. I love this. We heard that getting the mills in place is important for you guys to pay for the $15 million yearly debt service coming up, right? How exactly do you get the mills in place, right? You raise our taxes. That's how you get the mills in place. You raise the mills to get it to 15 million. Right now, yearly, it's 9 million. You're projecting 5 years from now or 4 years from now, it's going to be 15 million. There's only one way you get there, and that's raising taxes. I heard your people say that referendums are unsuccessful. Well, you know why, right? Because the taxpayers get to vote on your spending, and it never goes through. So why don't you put this up for referendum and see what the taxpayers have to say? Here's some questions. What if your Act 1 projections are wrong? What if your operating budget projections are wrong? What if your teachers' negotiations go south? And what happens if we go into a recession, right? And where is the analysis of how much this is going to cost an average taxpayer every year? I forgot. You can afford it.
Thank you.
Karen Maloney. Good evening. I would like
Can I just have you state your municipality?
Lower Providence.
Perfect. Thank you.
Good evening. I would like not to be interrupted. Thanks. So my question for the board is, do you think that we residents are rich? It seems that you all are real loose with our money. Last year I spoke about you giving Zerby a $46,000 raise, and a second superintendent at $200,000+ a year. I explained that senior citizens, some, are working part-time jobs to make ends meet. You voted yes on both. And here we are again. We all know this is a formality. You're going to move forward with it. But senior citizens are still struggling. I'm standing where I'm standing. It seems like it doesn't matter to you guys because you're going to move forward. All right. Same way you did with your $46,000 raise and the second superintendent because you're doing such a bang up job. No one should ever be taxed out of their home, especially seniors. They paid their dues and they put their time in. They should not be burdened with more taxes. I have a question for you. Will there be fist painted in a new building? Fist on the walls in the school. I went and talked to Joe Webster and asked him about it. Yeah, that's what the kids want. So when did the kids start running the school? That has no place in school, none. Some young men, recent graduates from Methacton, are on a job site with me for the last few months. And we're talking, and they graduated a few years ago. Their experience the last few years at the high school sucked. That's their memories forever. My high school didn't suck. Well, it did sort of, but it was my decisions. But that's on focus here. It was not because of the building. It was the policies and the politics of this board. You can have a brand new Lamborghini, but if you don't know how to drive it, it just look cool, doesn't go nowhere. School should be about learning and preparing the children for the world, the real world. To a lot of us, this is our home. We were born here. Some families here, 80 years. We're going to die here, and we're going to pass our homes to our children. You're going to strap us. There's people, seniors, you're giving me that smug look, right? There's seniors barely making it. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. New school, shiny. Keep it up with the Joneses. God bless you guys. Have a good night.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Jerry Snyder. I'm a resident of Lower Providence Township since 1988. And I'm here, first board meeting I've attended, and I'm here because I got this flyer in the mail. And thank you for sending that, because apparently these discussions have been going on for a while. I knew nothing about it, so I was glad to be informed. And I have to say, the description of the financials was puzzling to me. It had some contradictory information. It talked about the strong financials because of planned developments within 2 townships. My question is, does that include City View? And how does City View fit into your future plans, whether to build a new high school or whether to rehabilitate, repair what you've got? That's my first question. And it said flat student enrollment, and I'm trying to understand how a flat student enrollment enhances your financial position and ability to borrow money. My first thought is, why not spend the $69 million, roughly $70 million to repair and renovate what you've got? And why are we going to the, the shiny new Cadillac version? And where would this new, some practical considerations, where would this new building be built? What would be done to the existing high school building, if we're talking about that, during the construction of the new building? Would the $70 million have to be spent anyway just to keep it operational during that 4-year period of construction? The projected 4-year tax increase, it looked like that was for 4 years and then it would end. And I'm asking you, does that mean the tax rate would go back to the baseline as it is today after 4 years? That wasn't clear in the brochure, but I appreciate the ability to attend and comment on this. And it was especially urgent to me because on the schedule here, he said October 9th, they're going to be voting, special vote. So it sounded like it was a done deal halfway down the chute already. So I would urge you not to jump into this new high school idea. As enticing as that may sound, I don't think it's the way to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Robert Cannon, 3240 Mill Road in Worcester. I said this at the information session that we had a couple weeks ago when I was there for the first time. I live down the street from the high school on Mill Road. Incredibly concerned about the access point for the buses coming out onto a very small, short, and narrow section of Mill Road there at what I call Kriebel Mill West. Secondly, I live down the street. I'm at that high school a lot. And I didn't know this project was even happening until I ran into a gentleman from Philadelphia Electric Company marking out things on the street. And I said to him, "What's going on? What are you doing?" He goes, "Oh, there's a new high school coming." And I was like, and I think I'm not alone. I said this to Dr. Zerbe at the meeting we had a couple weeks ago. This feels incredibly fast-tracked. This looks like a shiny trophy for you guys on the board here that you want. I think renovation is clearly an option that was, in my opinion, not fully vetted the way the option 3 or 3A that we're talking, the 200 million. I'm also very concerned about the financial presentation here tonight. At the meeting 2.5 weeks ago, the number that was discussed was 220 million for the project. Now we're talking 200. These numbers are being thrown around easily. We're talking our money, our tax basis is going to go up, and I'm very, very concerned that this is moving along quickly. Dr. Zerbe, why was the one session for a vote moved back? Is there a sense from you and the rest of the board that this thing's going too fast? You moved it back tonight. You said it's not going to have a vote on that one night. Can you answer that, or can
Can
somebody
I
answer?
just, so typically we take comments and then we'll address it at the.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
All right. Well, will somebody make note of that? Why it was moved back? Thank you.
thank you.
My name is Mary Lou Cannon. I also live on Mill Road in Worcester. I attended the session a couple of weeks ago to hear about the high school. And I really don't want to talk dollars and cents because I think those are pretty much decided. I want to talk sense, S-E-N-S-E. But before I do that, I do have to comment on the financial presentation that was given here tonight. As my husband mentioned, when I asked the question about whether or not the new school would be the third option or the fourth option, because one was, less expensive than the other, I was told by, I guess, the architect, I'm not sure, that the project was now neither. It was a $219 million project. The financial presentation was for a $200 million bond. Unless you have $19 million hanging out just waiting to be spent, doesn't take a Wharton MBA, which I have, to know that the financials aren't accurate anymore. And also, the other thing that I kind of was able to glean, thank you very much, Ms. Perdue, for asking for a larger presentation view for those of us, because I couldn't see a thing. But the time frame seems, in terms of starting the project, in terms of starting to take money for the project, may seem a little off, because don't you still have to go through the township? And from what I saw in the presentation a couple of weeks ago, you had quite a number of variances and things that had to be dealt with at the Worcester Township level that are going to take time, that are going to take changes to the plan the way it is. And that gets me to what I want to talk about, which is Mill Road. Mill Road was there before the 1959 high school was built, and there was no access put to it because Mill Road, I asked this at the meeting, do you know how wide Mill Road is versus Kriebel Mill, where all of the cars and buses come out onto the street and go to the light or come into Worcester? And the answer, I didn't get an answer. No one knew. So my husband and I went out and we took some measurements. Where the buses come out, where there have been upgrades, it's about 27 feet wide. On Mill Road, it varies. It can be 23 feet, 21 feet, down by the bridge on on Mill Road after you go past Marybrook. It's less than that, 19, 18 feet. And so I had said from the very beginning, Mill Road was not made for bus or even car access. The fact that Worcester and
Can I just ask you, I'm sorry, typically it's 3 minutes, if you can just wrap it up.
Okay, so to wrap it up, I'm just going to say, I think that there are more cuts in Kriebel Mill Road right now than you have in the plan. I think that the parking, especially for the drop-off, should be rerouted. The buses should be rerouted because it makes no sense to come out onto Mill Road. There isn't even a stop sign at Kriebel Mill and Mill where you're going to have every single bus come and make a right and go up to the light behind the cars from the parents
Thank
and
you.
from the students.
Thank you
I'll-
so
I'll
much.
take it up the next time.
Yeah, and you can always send
Sorry
an
about
email
that.
to the board. Thank you.
Just real quick before we start the clock, is there any reason why that presentation from PFM could not have been put on the website in advance? I couldn't see a thing, and I just tuned out because I couldn't follow a thing. I mean, I think as a common courtesy, if you're looking to borrow $200 million that the taxpayer got to pay, let us see the presentation in advance. All right. Brian Earnshaw, Lower Providence. First thing regarding the treasury report. I took a look at that today, and given that you increased taxes nearly 5%, and a lot of taxes were due August 31st, I expected a much higher cash balance. So I went back and looked at last year, August of 2023. And in fact, your cash balances are nearly $6 million or 12% less, even after raising taxes 5%. Is there any reason why? Perhaps Paul, acting CFO, Dr. Zerbe, you could enlighten me on that. Regarding the bond resolution, I agree with a lot of the previous comments. I'm not going to repeat any of those. There was one selling point PFM tried to make was the positive arbitrage on the rates, given that you could earn interest at a higher rate than you're paying interest expense on. Has anybody done an analysis of when that turns to negative arbitrage, given rates are coming down, as PFM started in their presentation? I'd ask PFM, but they exited pretty quickly. So perhaps you can comment on that. And you got to show us what the $15 million is going to be spent on. You can't just have a big slush fund. You've got enough of those on your balance sheet. Regarding item 11D, the job description for the transportation coordinator, my understanding of this job description, one of the changes is that you're adding the supervision of 11 employees, which was previously done by the finance director. So my question is the finance director's job description being revised to remove those responsibilities? If not, they should be. Regarding the change of status for that position, you're going from a $65,000 plus overtime salary to a $90,000 flat salary, mainly because of these additional responsibilities. Are you then reducing the finance director's salary for the removal of those responsibilities? If not, we're paying for them twice. And then finally, regarding the action, one other thing, the superintendent goals. I saw that was added late. Is there any reason why the superintendent's goals do not include two things that are kind of important to me and I'm sure others? Why don't they include anything relating to improving the education quality and ranking of the district, or anything relating to fiscal or financial matters? I would think educational improvement should be pretty important. I think it should be part of the goals. And then finally, I found this presentation from June 2019 relating to the Audubon Elementary School. It says, let's repurpose this property for the benefit of everyone. Let's save the Audubon School for future generations as it has for the past 90 plus years. It took you 5 years to get to the right answer. Decide to sell the school. I've been calling on this for 5 years. I'll ask for a little levity on time given the previous speaker. Thank you.
You can start to wrap up. Thank you.
Yes. So the big question is, you track right to know expenses down to the penny. How much have you spent on keeping Audubon on the district's books for those 5 to 7 years? How much have we spent in maintaining the property? How much have we spent paying KCVA to do designs for a park, fields, a community center? How much time and effort has gone into that? My estimate is probably $2 million plus from that bad decision not to sell it when it was closed.
All right, thank you very much.
Good evening, John Andrews, Lower Providence. Before I start, I'd like to get a little clarification on the mailer that I received on Saturday. It goes into the campus planning process, and it says, consider joining us for the following dates. September 12th, an open forum, discussion and feedback. Then it says for September 17th, your work session, discussion and feedback. You had a big crowd of 3 of the public that time. Then we're tonight, September 24th, discussion and feedback. Is there going to be a part of this meeting where that occurs? Or is it just a typo a couple times? Regarding, I think it's 10D, the resolution. When I downloaded the resolution, the PDF included the number 2024 and another number that looks like 118 million. When I get to the resolution, there's nothing about time period, nothing about money. It looks like an attempt to get a blanket approval for the administration, not for this year or next year, but forever. Quite different than other resolutions of a similar nature that indicate how much would be borrowed and for what purposes. The board just cannot vote in favor of a blank check. And I hope that the board wakes up and appropriately reins in that monstrous error. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Eileen Walski. I live in Lower Providence, and I would just like to say that this is bad timing for everybody. Everything is bad in this country, as we all know. Can this project be possibly postponed for a couple of years? We're in hard times. We might go into a depression or a recession. You're going to put a lot of people in a bad position. And I go to work every day thinking, what's going to happen from one day to the next? This country is in dire straits. Can you please consider the decision you're going to make when we are taxpayers? Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Jack Gennardi. I live in Lower Providence. I just want to say one thing about the Audubon School. I know you're going to sell it, and that's fine because, I mean, it's a mess. I live near there. And I just hope whoever you sell it to, that you realize there are people that live there and been living there for years, like 36 years I've been there. And if you sell it to something commercial or something like that, I mean, all the people living there I know are my neighbors, and they're horrified by that thought. Because, like, I guess it was 3 years ago, you talked about making a community center and all this other stuff. Could you just please remember that, when you sell the place, don't sell it commercial, to keep it, respect the people that live there. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Beth Ann Bittner-Mazza, Audubon, Lower Providence Township of the school district. I hope, since we've had more than plenty of comments on the presentation, that we will change that for the future and that it will be made available to all of our taxpayers preceding this meeting so that they can take a better look at it. Even with the trick of taking a picture and blowing it up on my phone, it didn't work. Was still visually impaired in being able to see it. So that being said, as a graduate, I'm not denying that our treasured school needs some updates, but I do think we do need to consider how big of a project that we're investing in and rein it in a little bit. And as someone has already said, maybe focus a little bit more on what we're putting into our students, not what we're putting our students into. There was a lot. I wish our financial team had stayed here. I did have some questions for them. Maybe I'll put them in an email to you because I'm guessing only they could answer them. But I was curious about the arbitraged earnings and if they were part of the interest earnings that helped decrease and bring it down that 3.7 million. But still, the borrowing capacity that we're at, it seems from conversations I've heard that we're leaning to the larger project versus the smaller project. And there is a lot going on in the world, and we've seen a lot of changes over the last 4 years and how incredibly different costs have changed through the years. And so when we look at this project, I just worry that if we take it to the max and we don't take into consideration what future changes could be coming, that we could find ourselves in a bit of a financial pickle, which unfortunately puts all of us at burden, the taxpayers at burden. So I do ask that when you're making this decision, because I have the opportunity to work with a lot of different people, not only in this area, but throughout the county and throughout the state. More and more seniors are staying in place and aging in place, and we are, I promise you, taxing our seniors out of their homes. I talk to seniors who are going through their 401ks and paying and keeping up with taxes. So please, I urge you to consider them when you're making this decision. And finally, pass this project in regards to the sale of Audubon School. From someone who has many fond memories there, not always as a student, but through camps and whatnot. And there is some history there. And like Mr. Gennardi said, and I happen to know exactly where he lives, God bless him, there is a neighborhood around that school. And when you are taking into consideration who you're selling it to, I ask that you think about that. The people, the neighbors. It saddens me that when we had the opportunity.
So can I ask you to just wrap up?
Sure.
Thanks.
Absolutely. That when you're doing, that we couldn't come to some sort of decision to make that work together collectively to make it into a community center. So on behalf of all the Audubon residents, I do ask that when you're working on that sale, that you do keep the neighborhood in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. I think with that, we'll close this portion of the public comments, and we'll move on to the rest of our agenda. At this point, we will also have appointment of student board representatives and administration of the oath.
So it's my recommendation that we ask the two student board representatives to come forward after the board votes on item 1, under 8.1, I guess it would be called. We vote on 8.1, and then we would then administer under 8.2 the oath of office. So, yeah, we need to take,
All right.
yeah, read the motion.
All right. So at this point, we will have the appointment of our student board representative. I have Marissa DiPaolo and Marion Wells. I will ask for a motion to approve the appointment of Methacton High School juniors Marissa DiPaolo and Maureen Wells as student board representatives of the Board of School Directors for a term of 2 years, effective 2024-2025 school year. One motion, second? Perfect. So at this point, we'll take, okay, can I check for any comments from the board on this? No? Okay, so at this point, I will ask for a vote. All in favor, say aye. All right, and that carries 8-0. Okay. All right, thank you both for your time. So at this point, I'll administer the oath of office for the newly appointed student board representatives, and you can read after me. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this Commonwealth, and that I will discharge the duties of the office of student representative to the board with fidelity. Thank you very much. And with that, we welcome you to join us up here and looking forward to it. You can have a seat. So I do want to say thank you again. We welcome you to the board. And I know this is not an easy task just because sometimes we're here late. So we do appreciate your time and looking forward to working with you as we go through the school year, well, for 2-year term.
Madam Vice President, if I may so suggest, could we have the student board representatives provide their report now?
Yes, we can have your report now if you have one prepared. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mary Wells, and I am a junior at Methacton High School. To begin, school started on August 27th, and freshman orientation happened on August 22nd. During orientation, student ambassadors volunteered to tour the freshmen around the school, and also the freshmen had a chance to check out new clubs and play icebreaker games. During the first few days of the new school year, each grade was brought together in the auditorium where the principals led a discussion to set expectations for the upcoming school year and new policies being implemented. At Methacton, there's a brand new esports club that has an amazing new esports gaming lab. For anyone who may not be aware of esports, it's not just kids playing video games, but it's a team-based activity where teammates work together to accomplish a common goal using technical, analytical, and collaborative skills. Esports has taken off across the world and is recognized as an NCAA Division I sport in college. This club also allows casual student players an opportunity to enjoy the community and game with their fellow peers while supporting our team. Mrs. Palmer, Mrs. Griffith, and Student Council have been working hard since the first week of school to prepare for the homecoming pep rally and homecoming dance that was held on September 20th and 21st. For the entire week leading up to homecoming, the entire student body was able to participate in Spirit Days, with the last days being color wars, where each class wore the same color shirt. On this day, students were able to choose activities they would like to participate in throughout the morning. For example, chalk art, puzzles, trivia, and flag football. At the pep rally, all fall sports were recognized with a small sports parade. This was followed by class tug-of-war, with the junior class being victorious overall. Also, the teachers were pied in the face. At the end, Minithon organized a powder puff game that was juniors versus seniors. The winner was the junior team. Our homecoming football game took place Friday night, September 20th against Boyertown. Methacton secured the win, with the final score being 39-14.
Good evening. I'm Marissa DiPaolo, and I'm a junior at the Methacton High School. During the first few weeks, you see fellow sports team interacting with sport themes on their game days. Either it would be random object day, where each team member would bring in random objects to swap with their fellow teammates, or country day, where they all wear a theme. I would also like to talk about the new car line, as it has added a new area to make it more efficient for the riders and the parents and anybody living on the street. We're hoping to cut down the car line with this new area added, and also to help prevent the additional delays that have caused major lines for the car line. I also like to talk about the new K-8 auditions for the school's play. The play has added K-8 auditions for the younger roles for the Christmas Carol. This has allowed our younger students to participate in our theater programs. Also has interested our younger people into exploring theater and the arts as well. I would also like to touch on the homecoming dance, as it was a major success with most students appearing. Also, I want to thank all the student council and staff that helped put it together. All students enjoyed dancing and playing yard games in the boys' gym. It was much faster with the new ticketing system, which was online and provided by Hometown Ticketing. This new ticketing method has allowed students to get tickets faster and has allowed people to enter student events such as games, dances, and mini-thon events to help. It has made them to be able to go through faster and be able to buy tickets in advance. That's all I have to report.
Thank you both for your report. Very well and very clear. And just from your first day, what we hear is there's a lot of excitement, a lot of good things happening at the high school. You mentioned a lot of them: e-ticketing, the car line, homecoming, color wars, and I think we have a lot to look forward to, because we're only 1 month in, and we're happy to have you here. And thank you for bringing us all the exciting news at the high school. Looking forward to hearing more. Thank you. So with that, we'll move on with our the rest of our meeting. So now, may I have a motion to approve the August 2024 board meeting minutes as attached? All right. And then second? Perfect. Okay.
Both the 20th.
I'm sorry. Yes. So I should just say both regular and work session meetings for August 2024. All right, and then can I ask if there's any comments on the meeting minutes? No comments? With no comments, can I ask for a vote? All in favor? All right. Yes? No? Okay, so motion carries 8-0. All right. And then with that, we'll move into fiscal items. May I have a motion to approve all fiscal items as presented? All right. And then a second? All right, Ms. Chandler. And with that, can I ask
I have a comment.
if you have comments? Perfect.
So a comment, I just want to make a clarification for the members of the board. Based on or consistent with the recommendation from the work session on September 17th and this evening as part of the financing plan associated with either $100 million borrowing, doing renovation with the high school, or $200 million borrowing as part of a potential new construction, that the authorization for the resolution will be for $15 million.
Can I check if there's any comments from the board in reference to fiscal items? Ms. Alston?
Yeah, just addressing some community comments. So, Dr. Zerbe, what you just said, that was to clarify the parameters of the resolution?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. And I guess just from hearing different comments about, sort of related to this motion, but also in general, do we have a place on the website, as we did with Arrowhead, like a single place where everyone can get all of these information presentations and everything? And if we don't have that, could we please do that?
Yes, so for approximately a year and a half, almost 2 years, we have a place on the district website. So when you go to www.methacton.org, right at the top banner, there's a big, I'll call it a big oval that says Methacton High School Campus Planning Process. By clicking on that link, you'll be able to see approximately 9 different links, some taking you to explanation of lunch and learn, some to presentations, some to the campus planning process. So everything that we've done from the very beginning is located there, from the flyers to the presentations to the discussions from the members of the public of the part of the campus planning process. So it's all housed there and certainly available for people to digest. In addition, all the presentations that you would see here this evening will also be posted there for people's consumption.
And then along with that, is it our practice to wait to post? I guess there was some concern about the visibility of this presentation, and what is our usual timeline?
Yeah. So I think there's really 2 challenges with the process. One, we commonly present the material, then post it after the fact. But in terms of the visibility on the screen, PFM typically doesn't give us a PowerPoint presentation. It's done in PDF. So because they condense a lot of information into those slides, it makes it, when I say slides, I say PDF pages. It would require someone sitting at the computer to be able to blow those up on a regular basis and follow along and know that. And maybe for the future, we could have either myself or someone with some financial background and knowledge of this be able to help follow along with the process. So we'll certainly consider that.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess just because this also came up, when we do these types of presentations, could we also include the cost to the average taxpayer? I know we do that in many presentations and in many ways, but I did not see it in this one. Could we please include that in the future?
It wasn't in this presentation, but it's been in all the other prior presentations. It's just a matter of timing till we got the information in terms of the draw schedule and putting all the rest of the stuff together this evening. We just couldn't put that properly in place, but you should expect that for the next open public forum that we present on October 2nd.
Okay, thank you.
Can I check if there's any other comments? Ms. Graff?
Yeah, I also wanted to just get clarification in regard to public comments. The resolution for the 15 million was clarified, but I also wanted to just clarify that can be used for, excuse me, anything related to facilities projects. So that could be capital projects that the district has to do moving forward, or anything related to engineering design or projects at the high school.
That is correct. So if, just in reference to the 917 presentation, when we talked about the master facilities plan, actually in the master facilities plan, as you all know, the high school is actually built into the master facilities plan as well. So it includes the high school, it includes design work, it would include the actual construction of things, but anything related to a capital project, preparing for or actually doing it, the 15 million can be used for. And that's for any of the buildings, whether it's the high school alone or for the other ones that are within the district's maintenance schedule.
Excellent, thank you.
Mr. Winters?
Yeah, there are a couple questions. Some of them I think were associated with the bond resolution, but I do believe the arbitrage was not a part of the $3.7 million. I think there was a question related to the tax rate that he saw on Mr. Snyder saw on the 4 years. It would not retract back to the previous rate, just to be clear there. I think there was a question from Mr. Earnshaw related to the cash balance on the Treasury. I don't know off the top of my head. I would speculate, though, it's related to the timing of the local tax payments and the local pay bills that we get from, is it Berkheimer or whoever, Deal, or whoever's our tax collector related to that. It's probably, you'll see that correct itself in the month of September.
It's definitely a timing issue.
Thank you.
And when I say issue, I don't mean it's a problem. I mean it's just timing of the delivery. So just because the tax collector collects the funds doesn't mean the district receives them. They need to receive them from the tax collector.
And I'll just check if there's any other comments or clarification before we move on. Okay, so with that, I will ask for a vote. All in favor? All right, 8-0. Including my- And we'll move to personnel items. May I have a motion to approve all personnel items as presented?
Madam President, Vice President, if we could, let's have Dr. Sergini update the board. There are a couple add-ons from the work session. Dr. Sergini?
Thank you.
Thank you and good evening. The personnel items for the month of September include those presented last week at the work session and the following additions. For employments classified, Maria Longenecker, part-time attendance secretary at the high school, Gage Farrell, monitoring assistant at Arcola, Narissa Spampanato, paraprofessional at Woodland, and Jacqueline Halpin, recess assistant at Woodland. We welcome Maria, Gage, Narissa, and Jackie to the Methacton family. There are 2 additional uncompensated leaves, professional, Teresa Dunbar, mathematics instructor at the high school, and Laura McDonald, special education instructor at Arcola, and several additional supplemental contracts, including contracts for scheduling assistance, breakfast and bus duty, and also a fall coach at Arcola. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sergini. Madam Vice President? And I will make one note here. We received an abstention request for item 1107 from Mr. Winters. So if we could, we could take, if Madam Vice President so suggests, we could take all of the personnel items with the exception of 1107 for a vote.
Okay. So just to clarify, are we going to do a motion for all items and then we'll do the vote separate, or should we do a motion for all items or separate it out in the motion?
You can make, if the board so agrees, you could make the motion to approve all personnel items with the exception of 1107. And then we would come back and do 1107 separately.
Perfect. Okay, so at this point, can I ask for a motion for all personnel items with the exception of 1107? Second. And I'll check for any comments for it. Ms. Alston?
Yes, I just did have a comment or a question from the community member. Is there a change of description for the finance director? Is there any change of job description?
We're not making a recommendation for a change.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just check if there's any other comments? No. At this point, I will ask for a vote for all items for 11 except for 1107. All in favor? All right. Carries 8-0. And then can I ask for a motion for 1107? Second? Perfect. And at this point, I will ask for, do you have to read it or vote?
I do. Sorry, guys.
No problem.
Based on the Ethics Act at a public meeting that is being held on the 24th of September, it is my intention to abstain from the vote item 1107, which involves the approval of an item on the homecoming chaperones for the high school due to conflict of interest under the Ethics Act. The nature of my interest is as follows. My wife is an instructional aide at the high school and was a chaperone.
Thank you. And then can I have for all in favor of 1107? Abstentions? 1. So the vote carries 7-0-1.
Thank you.
All right. So curriculum and programs, there are no items under curriculum and programs for this month. And we'll move into policy. May I have a motion to approve?
Madam Vice President, the items on policy are for first reading. There are no second reading policies. So we can move on to other.
Okay. So we'll move on to other. May I have a motion to approve all items listed under others as presented? Perfect. Second? Okay, Ms. Graff. And do I check for any comments or discussion for these items? Ms. Austin?
Yes, for the, based on the audience comment, could you please, Dr. Zerbe, just review the zoning of Audubon School, please?
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Alston. So there were a couple of comments, I believe, that were of concern that we take into consideration who we sell the property to, if in fact the board votes here this evening to sell the property. If that would, to clarify that, the district will certainly take great care in determining who they would sell it to get the best return on that sale. However, the property's zone is currently zoned for only either residential or institutional use, meaning a school use or some other institutional government use, but not for commercial. So most of what I heard was concerned about commercial, and that's not possible unless the township chooses to change the zoning, which I'm not heard of any such thing. So I hope that helped clarify things. So it can't be sold for commercial.
Yes, Ms. Graff?
Yeah, along those lines, can we also, I just wanted to clarify, when we say residential, it's not an option for them to build a large residential complex, like a multi-family complex on the site. They would have to get zoning change for that. Is that correct? Or are we not sure?
Yeah, I know that our assistant superintendent for operations knows this pretty well. So we'll ask him.
It's actually zoned R2 residential with a public facilities overlay. So with regard to the residential component, it's single-family detached dwellings only, and there are a limited number based on the zoning that could actually go in there. So with the R2, it's the detached dwelling and some ancillary structures, things like a shed, a pool, those sorts of things that would be related to those single-family homes. And then the public facilities overlay includes permitted uses of a township building, emergency services building, library, government office, community center, for senior citizens, open space, municipal parks, and elementary schools. So those are the only things that are permitted by right under the zoning.
Great. So any additional or future zoning changes would have to go before the zoning board of Lower Providence.
That's correct.
So the public would have an opportunity to comment at that time.
That's correct. And zoning in a municipality can't be done just for one parcel.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Certainly.
Yes, Mr. Mursky?
I'd ask that we have 14H broken out to vote on separately, please.
Is there any objection from any board members of taking 14H, that's the enrollment projection update item, separately? Without objection, the motion as currently before the board then would be for all items under other 14 with the exception of 14H.
If I have a comment on 14H, we'll just wait till we get there. Perfect. Okay. Do we need a motion again for it? We can just proceed? Okay.
You have a motion. If there's no further discussion on any items under 14 other than H, you can move to a vote.
Any other discussions? All right. So at this point, may I ask for all items under 14 minus 14H, can I ask for a vote for those items? All those in favor? Okay. 8-0. And then I will ask for a motion for under or other 14H enrollment projection. Can I get a motion? A second? All right. And now can I ask for comments and for 14H or discussion?
I don't really have a comment. I just don't plan on voting for it. So I wanted it separated out because I wanted to vote for everything else. So I don't think it's necessary since we've had one done 2 years ago.
Okay. And I think my question was really, I wanted to ask if you can clarify the purpose of having a new enrollment project, a new enrollment forecast completed.
I think it's been in discussion, and I believe property for sure. It may have also been a discussion in Finance Committee, but the conversation has been that there have been master plan projects that have come before both of those committees that were based on the enrollment projections or anticipated enrollment projections against the existing enrollment projections and trying to determine whether or not additions or renovations were needed for any of those particular buildings. And I think secondly, it's incumbent upon the board, if it so continues to move forward with the high school campus planning process, that as part of the Act 34 hearing process, that you would likely be required to have an updated enrollment study to suffice for that. But again, that would likely be something that if we continue moving forward after October 29 consideration of a motion, it would be probably 12 months from that period of time.
Okay, and I know from the public meetings in reference to the Methacton High School campus planning, several members of the community have asked whether we will have a new updated enrollment forecast provided, or I mean, just interest on exactly what we're using to, as we're planning forward with the high school. My question is, when will we have the forecast available?
If the forecast is approved this evening, it is anticipated, because we're using the vendor that we had used approximately 2 years ago, that we would be able to present to the board at the October 22nd work session meeting.
Okay, thank you. I'll just check if there's any comments. Ms. Thiel?
Not a comment, just a question is, and I don't know if you have, Dr. Zerbe, I don't know if you have this answer, but is every 2 years about when it would be done, or is it around when there's planning, such as what we're doing now? Like, what is the timing that is usually done with these measures?
I think typically it depends on what your enrollment projections are showing. So if you're in a district that is showing a growth in enrollment, you would monitor that based on the trend that rate would occur. And similarly, if you were declining, so that you could properly plan. The simple fact that we've received or in our last projection that we're going to be relatively flat, it is not necessary to do that more than every 3 years. I would generally say. But again, as I mentioned earlier, the fact that we're considering a potential new construction of a high school, making that a type of investment, and having to go through the Act 34 hearing process, we're likely going to need that, within 12 months of this time frame anyhow.
Okay. Ms. Graff?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to make sure the board's aware, in addition to the high school project evaluation, we also had requested this as part of our property committee because we were looking at a potential project at Worcester. And in doing that vestibule project, we were debating whether or not we should add on additional classroom space. And with a very significant additional cost associated with that, we wanted to make sure that if the space is necessary, then that's a different conversation than if the space is not necessary because the enrollment projections are flat for that particular school, or if enrollment across the district is flat enough that we can potentially readjust our elementary schools to accommodate any increase in enrollment, then we wouldn't need to add those additional classrooms at Worcester. And so when we're looking at that spend for the capital projects budgets going forward, we asked to do the enrollment projection as a result of that discussion. So I just want to make the board aware it wasn't only for the high school, but it also has been brought up in every high school meeting I've been to, so.
No, and I think that's a great point, and that's why I asked the question. I just wanted that to be clear, and I think even tonight, a comment was made about City View and that impact, and we know where that property is sitting, so I think, to me, it makes sense that we are looking to have this. I know it's, hopefully you'll be able to get some more information or useful information from it.
Yeah, Madam Vice President, in reference to City View, while I can't remember the exact properties, on the August 27 board meeting, on probably slide 6 of that presentation, there was a listing that had potential developments within the 2 townships that approximated maybe 3,000 some dwellings. A combination of single family, mixed, and so forth. So it kind of answers the question that, but I can't tell you if City View was part of that. I just don't recall. I don't have the list in front of me, but likely it did.
Okay, if no other comments, I will ask all in favor. All right, that's 6. All, and any opposed? Oh, I'm sorry, 7. Any opposed? 1. So that's 7-1. Thank you. Okay. And then we will come down to dates for board members' calendar. The upcoming board meeting dates are listed on the agenda and also on the Methacton website. And then with that, maybe I'll just check if anyone noticed any issues or any comments on the dates that's presented here. Ms. Austin?
Yes, so October 9th, then,
Yeah, I'm gonna
okay.
go over all that. So if I could, I just want to kind of maybe address a comment at the podium, at the same time make sure that the board is again apprised of the modifications that I'm suggesting we move forward with in terms of our schedule and the determination of a path forward on the high school process. So as I ended my presentation, I want to make sure that everyone knows that there will not be a vote on another vote on moving forward with the high school project until October 29th. That will include the potential borrowing that we talked about, the 15 million, as well as the potential next step of the process. And maybe it's best if I make some clarification on what that vote would look like. That vote would really mean that the board would decide, if approved, decide that they would move on to the next phase of the planning process. It doesn't mean that they will build a new high school. It means that they're saying they have enough information to make a determination that going to the next phase, which is the schematic design and plan development phase, which generally lasts between 12, I believe, to 16 months. And certainly that will, be, it's quite a long-term commitment for us, and certainly a commitment towards spending funds associated with the more detailed planning in terms of the actual design of the building, a lot of feedback from the teachers, the public, feedback from students, also a lot more feedback. In addition to that, there'll be additional cost estimates that are provided based on the development of that plan. And in the same instance, it probably will address another person's comment at the podium that during that period of time, we would then go before the township to start seeking some of the approvals that are outlined. Like, for example, there was discussion about the road going out to Mill Road. There's setbacks challenges, there's height challenges. So all of that stuff has to be developed, and reasonably so. If any of those things slow the timeline down, we can easily make adjustments with our borrowing, and the schedule of borrowing would obviously have to change, assuming that we wouldn't start borrowing for a new high school until we knew we had, a reasonable approval from the township and from the board to move that forward. So there's a lot more discussion on the horizon with respects to this process. Certainly, these are not easy decisions, and I do commend the board for digging into all these details associated with the planning process, associated with the finances, and being stewards and doing their due diligence and making sure that they understand everything before them. It is important, and like we've said from the onset, we started this conversation because we recognize that the moment we start investing any money into that high school, we pretty much determine the future for the next 30 to 50 years. And this is part of, developing a comprehensive plan that could provide some significant opportunity for students in the future and for our entire school community. So with that, October 9th will still be advertised as a special meeting of the board. We will not be taking a vote in that meeting, and it'll be advertised as such. You will see the design team, including the administration, present an overview of the entire process to kind of sum up where we've been, what we've done, what we've learned, what it is. We're not going to be re-presenting the concepts. You've seen those. The October 2nd meeting will be videotaped and be posted online, so you'll be able to see that. And the public will be able to see that in its entirety, which includes the educational impact and also any of the updated slides from PFM. So that meeting is still going to be held. It's been advertised, through the flyers. And please recognize that the flyer that many people were holding up was one of many flyers that were distributed in an equal process to other flyers. So I just want the board to be clear on that. So with that said, we will have an October 2nd open public forum. We will be discussing some of the matters and certainly receiving public comment on October 9th. We will be presenting update on the enrollment and the master facilities plan on the 22nd. And we will finalize any of the questions that the board may have prior to the vote on the 29th of October. Are there any questions from the board on any of that? Ms. Alston?
Yeah, just could we please update this agenda then to reflect the October 9th?
Certainly will.
Thank you.
Was that all you were asking?
Yes.
Sorry about that.
And I would just ask, just because I know you have on the Methacton High School campus planning site on the website, I believe you have a FAQ going. I don't know if you're adding on as we're receiving questions at these meetings also. Are you adding those on, or if they're in there already, are you updating them? I'm just wondering how you're retaining it in reference to questions that come specifically from the board meetings, but not at those special planning meetings.
So the special planning meetings, we have a designated note taker. Those notes are then gathered and provided to me and then provided on to the board. We also are updating the board weekly on any of the survey updates. The survey, I should mention the survey. The survey will likely need to close probably by no later than the 22nd of October, so that we have enough time to put all the data together, provide a final, I'll call it collective, result of that survey. But we are certainly encouraging people at our meeting, open public forum meeting on the 2nd and the 9th, to give us feedback on that survey. But generally, we at all these open public forums, we are taking notes and providing those notes in summary fashion to the board.
Perfect. And thank you for the reminder for that survey. I think so far we've received some really great feedback. And while the survey is still open, I do want to encourage members of the public, just because I know everyone cannot attend the meetings, but the presentations are available, and take the opportunity to provide input into those surveys. So with that, I will move on to old or new business. Do we have any old or new business to add? Okay, Ms. Chanda?
I have some questions that have nothing to do with anything we talked about today, but from the community, I have gotten some feedback about bullying incidents and everything. So I have some questions about that. And if we're not ready to answer those questions, that's fine. But I want to put it out there so that we can perhaps continue the discussion, either in ed committee or wherever it's appropriate. Am I?
Yeah, Ms. Chanda, if I could, I would recommend that you would say anything you need to, but make sure you don't give any student identifiable information, okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
My questions are more around Methacton's policies, procedures, I guess. And there's three main questions. One is, what does the district do to make sure victimized students are safe in the building when they're there? When incidents are occurring that are outside of the school's jurisdiction, what are we doing to make sure that it's not being brought into the school? And the third one is, what are we doing proactively to kind of address it in the culture and the climate of Methacton as a whole? And that includes parents and students and staff.
Those are excellent questions, and I do appreciate you bringing them to our attention. If I could, and if you're in favor of this, I'd like to have Dr. Regina maybe work on answering those questions and leaving this as a conversation for the education committee in the near future. But certainly, if you have any immediate questions, and that's the same with the rest of the board members, if you have immediate questions, please reach out directly to Dr. Regina or myself. We want to make sure that you get the answers we need, but most certainly, if these are things that we want to discuss, yeah, you're probably stuck to the education chair as well. So we want to make sure we do that. Okay.
Yes, and Ms. Shanda's on education committee, and I do appreciate you bringing these up. I know there's been some discussions or items that have come up. I know Dr. Regina and the team do have some things that we're looking into working on. We've recently implemented a safe to say, and I know that was brought up last week. I don't know if you want to elaborate on it a little bit on some of the things that we're doing, but I do think this is certainly something that we can bring back to a committee to have some discussions on and just really kind of provide exactly how we're supporting our students and family and what programs we have in play. I know Dr. Gravity's discussed some of those, so I think there's a lot of things that they're looking into bringing to K to 12 level, and even I think the counselors at the Ed Committee last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, mentioned a lot of programs that we have within the building. So we can have these discussions. I think it's good for us to keep looking at this because it's becoming a problem. So thank you.
Real quick, but I just want to clarify. I have those three questions, but my biggest concern is, and I've had this conversation with some of the people at this table. There is this gap where something takes place and it's not in Methacton's jurisdiction, and the police can't really help, and the parents don't know what to do. So I don't know what the answer is there, but I think we need to talk about it and figure out what the adults in the community are going to do when that happens, because they're still our students, whether they're at school or at home or in between.
Oh, thank you, and I appreciate you for bringing it up. I took notes for it, so I will also now ask for any comments, Mr. Winters.
Real quick, three things. One, I'd like to thank Mr. Kenwood for moving the backpack to Arcola for a better facility to service that program. Number two, I know we don't have a communication that Miss Kelly has left, but we definitely, I know that this is going to boomerang back, but we definitely hear the comments related to senior citizens. It's a problem with the funding process, right? But we also are responsible for doing the right thing for this school district. So we have to balance those things. But the one thing I can point out is, as Ms. Alston has pointed out several times, is we do have, depending on your income, that follow a state program to be able to refund some of your taxes related to that. So my suggestion would be see if we could work with the Lower Providence with their weekly monthly newsletter, or buy whatever that thing comes out. And if they could get that blurb in there, because it affects all, and then also I assume there's something similar for Worcester. But I imagine I'll be accused of something for bringing that up. The last one, surprise, Simon's Heart is October 14th. Like to highlight the importance. It is an in-service day, and it's also so students will be home so they can get an appointment. I assume we still have appointments. It's doesn't take that long, and potentially could identify something that you're not aware of. So I believe that's also on our website for more information. I know it's been posted on Living in Lower Providence and such. That's it. Thanks.
Yeah, and I believe there's also communication from the building principals about it. So hopefully everyone is aware, but it is on the website. I think you do have to pre-register for it. I don't know if anyone know if there's a timeline on it, or is it just, what, do you happen to know?
I believe until the spots fill up.
Okay, perfect. And that's just a great opportunity. So I do encourage everyone to participate in the heart screening.
Can I just share one other thing, just because I was looking about the Simon's Heart screening? And someone can correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's for ages 14 and up, correct? I was excited about it, and I don't have a 14-year-old yet, so I feel like that would be something people might be like, oh, thanks. So thanks.
Katie, I'm not 100% sure. I thought it was a little younger than that, but we'll double check.
You have more information. Dr. Zerbe has some
It's
more
14
information.
I think it's 14 to 25, 22. 14 to 25.
And I think they under 18 have to be accompanied by a parent. Okay, so then with that, I will move to courtesy of the floor. The Board of School Directors will now provide an opportunity for residents to make comment on matters that are or may come before the board. The board asks that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. The Board of School Directors may choose to respond to matters following the conclusion of the comments. You also have the opportunity to submit questions via email to information@mafactin.org.
Jim Malik, Worcester. Regarding senior citizens, Paul, it's not a funding problem. It's your spending problem. Okay? You could never have enough money. It's a spending problem. What's the reason we're not voting on 10-9? I kind of missed that. If you could tell us why we're not voting on the 9th, appreciate it. So I understand that you're going to Worcester to get approval for a project that hasn't been approved. Is that what I heard? You're going to Worcester to get the approvals before you approve a project? We even know? I don't know about that, Dave. Enrollment. We need an enrollment projection. Has anybody compared the projected enrollment for this year to the actual? They've underestimated it by like at least 100. And then you're going to use the same people to do another one? I don't know what you're doing, but it's not good. Regarding the website, Dave, you don't update your website. I went there a couple days ago looking for the questions that I asked you under Q&A. They're not there. I couldn't find any of the questions that we asked in the public forum, right? Then the master plan was Fidavia's master plan until I told you about it. Then you put the new plan up. So, I think you've got some problems. I actually had to do 3 right-to-know requests for the presentations given at each of the public forums because they weren't on the website. But once I did my right-to-know request, they got put on the website. So there's some problems. Now, I just discovered, Dave, we asked you about referendum, and you gave us 2 ways to go to referendum. There's a 3rd way. I don't know whether you knew that. It's called the exceeding the Act 34 pupil cost way, right? And you exceed it by 100% because when you do the calculation, the minimum or the maximum is $70 million, and you're at $160 or $160 million. So you didn't tell us about that one, okay? But I would look into that because I'm certainly going to make sure I look into it. As far as the right to know concern, you guys kill me. We got what, under 100 grand? Where were you folks when you were spending $1 million a year on right to know? Where was the concern? Now you're worried about 100 grand? $1 million, right, Dave? And that's because of you. Because you hired Sweet Stevens, you let them handle the right to know process, and it was an absolute disaster, right? And now you're in charge of this $425 million project. That's why I say you should go.
Thank you.
John Andrews, Lower Providence. The new high school referendum issue. As you know, an Act 34 hearing is required prior to go ahead on a new school, as was done for Arrowhead, and would be required for a new high school or a referendum. Act 34 still has teeth, even though it currently lacks a state funding subsidy. What you may not know is another Act 34 hoop to go through. It requires a referendum when the maximum building construction cost exceeds the aggregate building expenditure standard, or ABES. For this new high school, the maximum building construction cost is not $200 million, but a lower figure of $158 million that excludes items such as the district administration suite, site preparation, and soft costs. In this instance, the ABES is about $78 million. Based upon current per pupil cost limits, FTE figures for various rooms, and a standard methodology by PDE. Thus, this construction cost of $158 million is greater than the ABES cost of $78 million, and a referendum will be required. According to PDE, no such referendum was ever attempted, as adjustments were made to avoid the requirement. Most referendums have failed. School districts have utilized smart workarounds. Here, I don't see a way to avoid a referendum. Instead, consider a renovation and engage an architect to lead it. If the renovation requires a referendum, it can pass. As I've said earlier, Schrader tried, and its concept has failed largely due to site difficulties. 6 months were lost. Drop the new high school concept and pursue renovation as suggested in multiple facility assessments by professionals. And if you should hold to the presentation that was mailed out last week on discussion and feedback at this meeting, I do have questions should that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just, oh, perfect.
Good evening. It's been a long evening, so I promise I'll make it quick. I'm Janine Darby, resident of Lower Providence Township. I'm the parent of 4 children, 2 Methacton High School alums and 2 current 10th and 11th graders. I didn't want to be here tonight, but thought it was important to be here sooner than later. Thank you for sharing and choosing the New Year theme of belonging. I'm here tonight because I am angry and I am frustrated. This is not about me, but about our students. Our students are hurting. Let's focus wholeheartedly on our students' wellness instead of a building of a new school. When will the school cultural climate change in the Methacton School District? When will marginalized, disenfranchised students feel like they belong? Let me ask the question differently if you don't know what those words mean. What are you going to do to stop racism against Black and brown students? What are you going to do to stop discrimination against Muslim students? What are you going to do to stop harassment against LGBTQ+ students? What are you going to do to stop bullying and threats against students with disabilities? When will you stop offending Native American students with the use of Native American imagery? I can continue, but I'll stop here with the questions. But I think you need to think long and hard about these answers to these questions. Personally, all of my children have been targeted and racially discriminated against by fellow Methacton students who don't look like them. For one of my kids, I have spent thousands of dollars to keep them alive due to severe depression caused by the racial trauma caused here in the Methacton School District from teachers and students. Why do we stay? My family and I have a right to live here, and my kids deserve and have a right to an excellent public school education. I'm sharing some of my personal stories, but I've heard many stories from other Methacton parents and students who have experienced racism, discrimination, harassment, and bullying. The majority may not care, Or you may think your kid is good and I love it and they love it here. But you know what? It's a horrible feeling to see your kid and other students being dehumanized, feeling less than, and wanting not to live. When kids and students are traumatized during their school years, it becomes a lifetime of emotional and mental health problems. Kids always remember how you make them feel.
Can I ask you to wrap up, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Let's do right by the students here in the district. This is a new school year, and I'm asking you to take immediate action or make changes to help prevent long-term mental health issues and enhance all students' school experiences. Please do something now. I'm pleading with you all.
Thank you.
Our students are hurting. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Brian Earnshaw, Lower Providence. A few things on a variety of topics. First, as you consider building projects, keep in mind that Arrowhead opened, it was 70% utilized, and Arcola is still 60% utilized. This should be not new information to you. Regarding presentations, if they're available, put them on the website. There's no reason to wait till after the meeting. That PFM presentation was presented to the Finance Committee, I understand. Why not just put it on the website so we can see it and follow along as it's being presented? Regarding the district's cash balances, so could you clarify this timing issue? Is it the tax collector is holding on to the money longer for some reason? Or is his collection rate slowing down because people can't afford the higher tax in the district or some other reason? We're approaching 3 months since the end of the last fiscal year. Any information on the financial or operating results of the district? Surplus, deficit, how much is surplus? If you could give me a sense of what that number is, and saying that the audit isn't really done is misinformation. You should know that number. The book should be closed by now, and you should know if there's any audit adjustments coming. If you could clarify something in the Finance Committee meeting minutes, there was a statement that said last year's legal costs came in at $498,000 versus a budget of $632, which is about 20% below budget. Since you based this year's budget on last year's budget, does that mean that the budgeted legal expenses are probably overstated for this year as well? In any sense of how much that might be? 3 minutes is a short period of time to be able to get a lot of comments across. Many speakers tonight went over that 3-minute limit, as you had to ask them to please wrap up. So with a high school project coming and spending potentially $220 million or $425 million, can we get more time to talk about this? Increase it for like 5 minutes. If that's not possible, I would like to request to have me personally added to the list of guests and scheduled speakers at your October 22nd work session for up to 30 minutes to provide comments on the high school project and give me the ability to yield some of my time to others who may have significant concerns on this project. If Dr. Zerby or Ms. Perdue, if you get back to me via email, let me know if that'd be possible within the next week so I can prepare properly, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, maybe I'll check if any of the board members have any comments regarding or responses to share. Okay, and then with that, I have a motion to, I'm sorry, Ms. Steele?
Yeah, I just would like to thank you for everyone in your comments. I just would like to respond to some comments that were made about belonging and just that, I think I'm looking forward to some further conversations, especially in our committees, because I think there are many different groups of people who are experiencing a lot of pain in our community. And I think more conversation and movement and action to help support all those communities would be really will be beneficial. So I'm looking forward to those conversations in committee to start moving things forward.
Perfect. And Ms. Steele also, you sit on the Ed Committee, so please hold us accountable for it, and we will continue to have those conversations. I would check for any comments, any final feedback. And then with that, may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? All right, second, and meeting adjourned. Thank you all. Have a good night.